Bai Yilin walked among the shattered highways, beyond the city limits where everything had long since fallen into ruin, a polluted realm. Whoosh! With a move of his figure, dozens of pollution monsters were pierced directly by a burst of cold light. His strength, far surpassing that of other ordinary adventurers, allowed Bai Yilin to move around here with ease. He somewhat wearily retracted his weapon and checked the time. It's about time to gather. He and the members of the Meteor Alliance, with their exceptional strengths far beyond ordinary people, were comparable to so-called rising stars. Therefore, even when competing with many adventurers, they could fight for the upper hand. However, Bai Yilin exhaled a breath. Those specks of light contained various residual energies, much like bombs. Their power indeed was impressive, a strong point of firepower, but they offered no enhancement to them personally. This was not what they sought. Bai Yilin's gaze shifted to the distance. The recent commotion from Demon Land had also naturally revealed itself to everyone. The connection to the ancient battlefield of the Sky Dome now dark red as if heralding doomsday. He also saw many people heading there. Clack! Bai Yilin didn't linger here and quickly moved on. He needed to rendezvous with the others first to discuss the next steps. Their agreed-upon meeting place was naturally not far from the city. After all, they didn't have any enemies, and the area near the city was relatively safe. However, as Bai Yilin stepped into the city, he found the surrounding streets already filled with quite a few people. It was very lively. What was going on? Were there more people than before, all attracted back by the spectacle of Demon Land? But Bai Yilin looked toward the dark red blood mist of Demon Land. Isn't that place full of maddening twists? Many people had tried to go there before, but all were deterred by the terrifying twisted that caused disorientation. Because, without strong spiritual power or special equipment, tool guidance, venturing in meant a certain death. But now, it seemed so many were eagerly awaiting, as if wanting to enter Demon Land. Bai Yilin maneuvered through the bustling crowd, preparing to head deeper. Suddenly, a hand patted his shoulder. It's me. Bai Yilin turned to see Frost from the Meteor Alliance, revealing a smile. The others have gathered. This time you're a bit slow. Bai Yilin took a slow breath, his expression relaxing. Can't help it. I was delayed on the way. In this place, filled with constant danger and isolation, vicious competition, one had to be always tense and alert. Knowing that the others were safe, he could also rest easy. He looked around. So, what's going on here? Frost didn't answer immediately but spoke softly. Come with me first. This time, there seems to be news about that sect hierarch you mentioned. Bai Yilin's expression shook fiercely, and he hurriedly followed. Wait, who did you say? The sect hierarch? Su Buxian? Frost walked ahead, not immediately responding, and soon Bai Yilin saw the rest of the Meteor Alliance, each resting and greeting Bai Yilin with weary yet smiling faces. It seemed each person had encountered various issues. You asked me, maybe you should ask it. Shandian, making sounds of magnetic axle rotation from Yu's shoulder, jumped down. Shandian. Bai Yilin wasn't too surprised but sharply looked around, slightly startled. Where's Jiangji? Aren't you with Jiangji? He hasn't returned, Shandian said. He should be with Su Buxian now. Also, this is something Su Buxian wanted me to give to you personally. Shandian opened his mouth, and a starfire chip appeared. Although Bai Yilin had many questions, he still reached out his hand. He had seen Brother Su using the starfire before, treating it like an ordinary thing, like those consumable fireworks in games, with no actual function but lovely visual effects. But as soon as his hand touched it, the starfire turned into a dot, merging directly with his wrist. The next moment, Bai Yilin's view jerked, and various holographic screens appeared before his eyes. There was even the hustler's sex emblem and identity authentication. Bai Yilin was somewhat stunned and even a bit touched. So, Brother Su didn't run away. And Shandian cocked its head. This is quite a curious technology with traces of our own, yet I cannot see through it. Naturally, it had studied the technology but could not parse a bit of it. The embedded strength seemed somewhat similar to the power that had saved itself before. Could this be technology that Su Buxian received from Boss Bai Qixing? Boss Bai Qixing's attitude toward Su Buxian had been a bit odd before. A mix of gratitude with a share of other complex feelings, respect, and disquiet. It seemed Su Buxian had told Boss Bai Qixing something, causing him to rush back to the divine machinery kingdom. Bai Yilan silently looked at the chip before him. There were quite a lot of functions listed on it, such as Starfire Universe Function. Allows people's spirits to enter a virtual universe, enabling physical contact and communication in any location in the present world. Dimension Training Ground Function. Can record a massive amount of world data, simulating this world into the Hustler's Sex training ground. Besides these, there were a whole array of Starfire Lighthouse Guide, Starfire Store, Starfire Support Call, and other functions. Bai Yilan was left with somewhat hurried breathing. These functions were too powerful. They were simply beyond the imagination of the current stage. Could the Hustler's Sect possibly say? And the next moment, he tried clicking, and a pop-up made by Yilan's surging heart instantly calmed down. Because the pop-up showed, currently, there are no funds, technical competencies, resources, or databases available. However, the sect hierarch is developing them with all his strength. Is developing with all his strength? Bai Yilan's face darkened. This must be pie in the sky. With such outlandish functions, how could they possibly exist? He had actually harbored hope a moment ago. Now it seemed he had just created a new folder to advertise it. Bai Yilan clicked again, and, as he had guessed, all the other functions were indeed grayed out. Upon clicking, it read, "Under development. Stay tuned." So, Bai Yilan took a deep breath. What is Brother Su doing giving me this thing? Bai Yilan suddenly paused, because one of the functions, Starfire Lighthouse Guide, was unexpectedly clickable. The next moment, Bai Yilan was stunned, as the map in front of him marked out a string of Starfire paths. This is... Bai Yilan was somewhat surprised, and the Starfire path even led to the Demon Land. Bai Yilan's gaze shifted to the distant Demon Land. Within the dark red, twisted haze of confusion, there was a huge celestial light marking reminiscent of a game screen. Of course, it wasn't something that really existed. It was the HUD created by the Starfire chip simulation, an interaction of virtual reality and physical reality. If that's the case, it seems I could enter the Demon Land. Bai Yilan instantly recognized the function's powerfulness. Then it seems Brother Su and Jiang Ji have already entered that place. Bai Yilan's eyes were incisive. The Hustler's Sect might be on the decline, but now it still seemed to have an upward momentum. This path was clearly carved out by Brother Su, guiding and paving the way for them. What followed, it seemed, was that he needed to lead the people of the Meteor Alliance to participate in the Demon Land. That was the place they were looking forward to. However, Bai Yilan's eyebrows lifted as he saw other messages from Su Qi appearing. Seek a steady pioneering team. Don't rush to compete aggressively. A stable and steady advance is fine. From the Sect Hierarch's Land Clearing Guide. Bai Yilan looked at the message. Although it was still informal, his gaze turned towards the distant Demon Land. Don't want us to act alone, huh? He could probably guess the true intentions of Su Qi. Even with the guidance, it seems the Demon Land is terrifying and dangerous, not a place to be taken lightly. That's why they were advised to follow other groups as much as possible. Bai Yilan looked around at the crowds still gathering, also speculating in his heart. Say, why are there so many people here? Is it also because of that Demon Land? You nodded gently at his side. Yes, the Demon Land has attracted a large number of adventurers, and at the same time many forces, divine sons, young masters, and the like are all forming teams, inviting adventurers to join them to enter the Demon Land together. This setup seems so familiar, Bai Yilan said calmly. The same process from the land of extreme evil, right? The great powers would move with countless adventurers, exploitation ongoing, and many adventurers were treated as mere tools. Because it works, Lin said slowly, and there's no other choice. Indeed, Without the guiding strength, one simply couldn't take part in the demon land whatsoever. Every city is probably like this now, with large numbers of adventurers gathering, all preparing to head to the demon land. Lin paused a moment. Besides, there's something else. Aside from those major powers recruiting here, there are two other people, announcing their forming teams. Didn't you see? Most of the top powerhouses among the adventurers are waiting here. Bai Yilan was taken aback. Glancing around, his brow furrowed slightly. Indeed, among the crowd, although there were a large number of ordinary adventurers weighing which land clearing team to join. Some chose the big power groups, some picked strong family clans from various boundaries, and there were those with unique mental methods who directly formed solo player groups. Divine Sons, on the other hand, were the rarest, as they had already reached agreements with each of the divine race's offspring, opting to enter the land of extreme evil at the first opportunity. But Bai Yilan noticed that there were still many supernovas, heavenly prides, and powerful individuals with formidable auras, or who had made a name for themselves in small areas, all standing to one side, unmoved. These beings, like Bai Yilan and the others, possessed extremely strong combat strength but had no background, or perhaps they had a background, but it simply couldn't compare to those at the very top. They are waiting for the two people you just mentioned? Bai Yilan paused slightly. Who are those two? You gazed softly into the distance. God's sons. In the distance, a resounding burst of brilliance appeared, and a fierce wind swept over the entire city. An astonishing and oppressive aura was directly facing countless people. Frost said in a deep voice, unlike the other God's sons, these two did not form any divine son group. They have announced that, before entering Demon Land, they will recruit some agreeable individuals to accompany them. So, that's why so many people are waiting here. Boom! Above the sky dome, 1,000 changes occurred, as countless giant meteors laden with fierce fire thunderously plummeted to the ground. The tremendous impact created terrifying fluctuations, rippling across the ground. Even many adventurers could hardly stand firm. Within the ripples, however, stood two figures atop the meteors, appearing within sight of everyone, unaffected by the chaos. Their eyes blazed like torches, and their presence was astonishing. This is the God's Sons. Bai Yilan looked at the scene, his face filled with shock, feeling numb in his hands and feet. They were not of the same caliber. You're making too much of a spectacle. Rein it in. One figure with a long spear strapped to his back, dressed in flowing white clothes, with a third, yet unopened eye on his forehead, spoke with a calm expression. The person beside him smiled calmly. Without me, we might have been delayed reaching here. He stretched out his hand. The next moment, all the gigantic falling meteors, ablaze with fierce fires, rapidly shrank. Everyone's eyes were shocked, as those terrifying meteors were just ordinary rocks on the ground. The two approached. The throng fell silent, parting to make way, not a word spoken. They had heard of the renown of God's sons but had never actually seen just how powerful they were. Now, having witnessed it with their own eyes, everyone was filled with fear of this formidable ability. The invincible paths of the divine race's sequences, the endless potential flowing in their bloodlines, and the astonishing divine augmentations. They had created terrains full of horrifying monster-like beings. You and Frost, and Bai Yilan, who were once considered heavenly prides, also felt their hearts quaking at the spectacle. Such presence signaled the true power of the future, and they could only feel a deep sense of helplessness. At this moment, Bai Yilan's ears twitched, hearing a voice, and he turned his head. Why don't you all give it a try? Off to the side, in a shadowy spot, was a man in crumpled clothes, squinting his eyes and leisurely smoking a pipe. The two God's sons are looking to recruit, and I think this group of yours seems quite fitting. The man wore a robe, his voice hoarse, seemingly indifferent to the wary and perplexed looks from the crowd, just speaking to himself. One is a God's son from the heavenly court. The other is a God's son from the infinite divine star. They do as they please, distinct from the others. It's a good choice. Bai Yilan was taken aback. Sir, who are you? The man slowly revealed a smile. I'm nothing but an ordinary wanderer in this game. He slowly walked towards a dark corner, and Bai Yilan frowned, following him, but the next moment, there was no one around the corner. He was somewhat astounded and hurriedly returned to look at Frost and the others. Did you see that? The person just now disappeared. The expressions on Frost and the others were even more peculiar. Who were you talking to just now? Bai Yilan was stunned. What was going on? Could only he see that person, while no one else was aware? Was it an adventurer with special abilities? Or perhaps, a native of this world? Or some other being? Bai Yilan wasn't sure. But this place had become the prelude to a future fiercely contested by countless people. Anything could happen. At that moment, the two sons of the divine race had already stopped, and everyone eagerly watched them. However, their expressions remained unmoved. There really are a lot of people. The calm son of the divine race with the long spear spoke up. How do you want to choose? Me? One of them smiled faintly, looking at the crowd and softly said, I only want some interesting people. Be it their abilities or something else, after all, you are already quite boring, it's rare to find some fun. The son of the divine race with the long spear remained calm, showing no emotional fluctuation at his words. He simply stated, Strength? I only value strength. The adjacent son of the divine race shook his head, his eyes blazing like torches. That's why I say you are boring, only knowing about fighting. I haven't met anyone as interesting as a fellow I encountered on the road. Yang Jian was unmoved. He extended his hand, placing 2 fingers under his chin. Gently, he uttered a word, spell. And the next moment, a huge vertical pupil appeared before him, showcasing his ability. He calmly declared, I only need those who are strong enough. And as people gazed at this eye, just staring for 10 seconds caused hallucinations to appear before their eyes. Everyone fell into a daze, their auras fluctuating. They had fallen into Yang Jian's trial. Heavenly court spell, huh? The son of the divine race nearby chuckled lightly. It's indeed an enviable ability. A clap of the hands brings forth all kinds of magnificent spells, and moreover, anyone can comprehend them. It's just a pity that non-followers of the Immortal Way sequence cannot learn it. In the distance, Bai Yilan, seeing this scene, felt a bit dazed. He looked at the vertical pupil and the son of the divine race, Yang Jian, and his gestures. Why did they look somewhat similar to his own? He also used spells, and the sequence ability he obtained from the ancient relic was related to magic. This was different from everyone else. It was also why Bai Yilan was able to fight his way to a high position and become that shining new star. But likewise, this was why he had fallen and became a downtrodden genius. Because this path of the sequence had broken, leaving no possibility for further growth. While Bai Yilan had searched for much information about this sequence, it was exceedingly hard to find, let alone other sequencers. Now, seeing someone with the same magical technique, even though his opponent was a son of the divine race, Bai Yilan saw hope. Without any hesitation, he stared at the vertical pupil, falling directly into the illusion it created. And around him appeared a figure, identical to Yang Jian, but it was just an illusion. It seemed that if he could defeat this opponent, he could qualify. Bai Yilan's expression gradually became more serious. Is this how it starts? The son of the divine race nearby gave a slight smile, looking at the crowd. Entering the demon land with us won't be that simple. In about a quarter of an hour, I hope some interesting people will emerge from among you. The voice of the son of the divine race already lightly echoed in everyone's ears. Additionally, remember my name. This son of the divine race, with a gentle smile and an overwhelming aura, lightly stated, Bei Xinxing. Xinxing and Anan's divinity was guiding them slowly through the twisted lost land. It also served like a lighthouse, pointing out the direction for the people behind them. This area was somewhat different from the Linyuan land that Su Qi had previously experienced. Simply put, the pollution of lost strength here was even more terrifying, with the power of the abyss filling the air like gas, needing only a spark. The next moment it would explode. And there was also the merging of the ancient battlefield projection overhead. Su Qi raised his head. The projection of the ancient battlefield in the sky dome was now connected to the demon land like a funnel, and the twisted fragments from the projection were falling downward. It was as if the demon land was devouring everything above. Brother Su, will Bai Yilan and the others come here? Jiang Ji was somewhat worried. Su Qi, what, are you still worried? Jiang Ji sighed. This place is very dangerous. We only made it here safely because of the Divine Sun's lead. He had already seen a lot along the way. The twists of the Lost Land. A single wrong step led to all kinds of strange and great terrors, threatening to devour them. If not for the divine guidance of the Divine Sun, they would have likely already been trapped in the twists, completely lost. And if they want to advance to higher places, they certainly won't want to give this place up. But without other means, entering here, they might face various perils. Jiang Ji was conflicted, already recognizing the present dangers. Not something that could be overcome by mere spirit, passion, or any such meaningless words like unity. Don't overthink it. I've already arranged for other members of the Hustlers sect to lead them. Jiang Ji, although I've just believed that Anan is a member of the Hustlers sect, why do I still find that difficult to believe? Are there other people in the Hustlers sect? There are. Could it be a divine son? Su Qi pondered. It might also be a son of the divine race. Jiang Ji rolled his eyes. As soon as he had said that, he knew this guy was talking nonsense again. Su Qi, on the other hand, was indeed speaking off the cuff. He knew there would certainly be various pioneering teams ready to enter the demon land. If it were Bai Yilan and the others, they would probably be reluctant to follow along with various powers and would prefer to align with strong figures like the Divine Sons, as they were more carefree and less restrained compared to powers. There's something else, Su Qi said indifferently. Instead of worrying about them, we should be more concerned about our current situation. We're about to run into trouble. Jiang Ji was taken aback and looked ahead at Qinqing and Anan, who showed no reaction and continued to walk forward. Are you sure? The two Divine Sons haven't noticed anything. Su Qi just smiled and kept silent. Qinqing and Anan were still relying on their divinity at this very moment, resisting the various lost powers, finding a safe path through the twisted, and gradually leading everyone deeper. The frown on Jiang Ji's brow eased. That guy was indeed just trying to shift the topic by saying that earlier, right? They had been moving for 20 minutes now, and nothing had happened. And at that moment, Qinqing and Anan's brows both twitched suddenly. Did you notice it? Yes. Anan nodded lightly and said solemnly, something seems off. The lost power around us seems thicker than before. We're on the right path, but it seems like we can't avoid the lost. It seems this is. Qinqing was calm. The hurdle we were told about at the meeting. He stretched out his hand. Everyone be careful. Prepare for combat. We don't know what lies ahead. Everyone's expressions tensed slightly, following the Divine Sons with calm faces. The relaxed mood that Jiang Ji had just regained now paused slightly, with a sense of vigilance arising. The next moment, everyone's view started to change, and the formerly twisted, lost place started to reveal hints. In front of them formed a street covered in blood and filth, with ordinary houses all around. Yet the sinister atmosphere still instilled a sense of danger. Everyone had their weapons ready, prepared to face the upcoming danger. Let's go. Qinqing and Anan, with calm faces, took the lead and walked on. The Lost Land may present various dangerous scenes or entities, possibly eerie images produced by pollution, or peculiar scenes left by various fragments. Although we don't know what will happen, Qinqing looked around the street. Even if it seemed like an ordinary street, it was actually completely sealed off, surrounded by twists, and there was no way to leave from the sides. The only thing they could do was to cross this street. Everyone followed the Divine Sons and sprang into action. They sprinted at an extremely fast pace, forgoing any probing process. Whoosh! Their silhouettes turned into blurred figures, with a sound of tearing through the air, rushing towards the end of the street. And as they moved, buildings around them instantly began to crumble, spilling vast amounts of blood, and endless insects burst out suddenly. Insects? Is this it? They weren't ordinary sequencers. If it was just a swarm of insects, it couldn't pose any threat to them. Achi and the others, with no hesitation, struck out. A torrent of sand burst forth. Flames blazed, bombarding the swarm with roaring attacks. The huge explosions were like missiles, with strong shock waves reaching hundreds of meters in destructive range. But the next moment, their expressions changed slightly, because not only did the number of insects not decrease, they actually devoured that energy. Where they passed, not even a speck of dust was left behind. All was consumed completely. Attack methods are useless? Even spiritual energy can be devoured? Someone threw a piece of extremely hard high alloy. This is an alloy that can withstand a strike from Sequence 6. It's the stuff that burst out from the globule before. This high alloy, when thrown in just a few breaths, this metal that could withstand a Sequence 6 attack, was instantly nibbled clean. The terrifying swarm of creatures left nothing behind wherever they passed. And at this time, Qinsheng squinted his eyes and unleashed a powerful explosion. His strength far surpassed the others, with the terrifying explosion directly flipping over the streets behind him, and the undulating waves stirred up a veritable dust and firestorm. This time there was some effect. However, it was instantly filled by the countless creatures that surged forth from within the distortion. So that's how it is, Qinsheng said calmly. Let's go. Inside this distortion, there should be a fragment of a world hidden, and it ought to be filled with these types of creatures. Destroying a part of it is just the tip of the iceberg. It will be filled up in an instant. There's no end to them. We don't need to stay here, we just need to pass through quickly. They continued to move forward. This street seemed endless, and if you weren't careful, there were turns. Around one such corner, various bizarre life forms and monsters came charging out. They hungered desperately for each person's flesh and blood, bursting with a bloodthirsty madness. Perhaps others would exhaust themselves trying to flee here, desperately afraid of being overwhelmed by this terrifying horde. However, for those present, other than occasionally furrowing their brows, there were hardly any emotional fluctuations. These things posed no significant threat at all. Qinsheng and Anan were calmly chatting away. You should know as well, Lost Land itself is a bunch of fragmented worlds polluted and gathered together, full of distortions, prone to encountering all sorts of abyssal oddities. These are their terrifying powers. Anan nodded slightly. He did know these things since he was previously surrounded by demigods who had retired from ancient battlefields. He said quietly, "This is the terror of the abyss. Some people always think that with the descent of Curtain, as chaos comes, they see it as a chance to rise. They always believe that the God's Palace, which represents the order of the present world, and the confrontation with the abyss once more, will give them more opportunities, because when the powers at the top can no longer attend to everything, chaos begins. But little do they know, what they each consider to be pollution monsters are actually not the main force of the abyss. Those are merely the result of numerous worlds collapsing, ordinary lives within them being transformed into polluted creatures, and then evolving in a crumbling manner. Those are just the derivatives of pollution power. The real main force, like the evil god, is sealed in the abyss, those horrifying worlds, horrifying creatures of the abyss, once they appear. That would mark the true beginning of disaster." Jiangji was gritting his teeth and flying at high speed in a frenzy. "Damn it, I'm glad I'm agile. Otherwise I would have had trouble keeping up with you guys." His strength was still a bit overtaxed. "They're not saying anything." Su Qi looked at Lu Fan and Rab, who buried their heads and ran desperately. "Don't think I don't know they have the acceleration sigil on them, from the Divine Sun, right? I don't have one yet." Jiang Ji's eyes widened. "Alas." Su Qi shook his head. "Why are you acting like a child? I reminded you half an hour ago to pay attention to your situation, and you didn't believe me." "Jiang Ji, half an hour ago? Are you Superman or what?" Both divine sons noticed something was off here just a few minutes ago. You must have cheated half an hour ago. Then I also will, Jiangji retorted. I said when we leave this place, there's still danger coming. Don't worry about how long it will take. Just see if it has come. Su Qi stretched out his finger. You are very wise. However, Su Qi wasn't just guessing a moment ago. His spiritual eyes were more active here than he had imagined, and his spiritual power was also unusually invigorated. Although the power of the evil god in the spiritual eyes made Su Qi constantly distracted to resist, it also brought convenience, allowing Su Qi to move unimpeded here, perceiving various anomalies from great distances. It's like returning home. In all sorts of ways it is. In every sense, it was a homecoming. One was for Su Qi himself, as this small town was the very site of the instance he had experienced before, with all sorts of demons inside that he had not yet actually met but certainly felt a sense of old acquaintances returning. The second was for the spiritual eyes, which also obtained the evil god's eye right here, and furthermore, many changes had been born from this place, turning it already into the backyard of the abyss. This feeling was comfortable, not a proactive thought from Su Qi, but rather a sensation from the origin of this power. Simply put, upon entering this place, others would feel their scalp tingle and unwittingly experience a chill spreading throughout their body. Moreover, under the pollution, their minds would continuously hear all sorts of weird, twisted whispers, constantly losing sanity points until they collapsed. But as for Su Qi, being here didn't exactly feel like a breath of fresh spring air, but at least it was maximum comfort. Everything here was astir in the abyss, making the poisonous arsenic that others feared completely different in front of him. When the eerie chill wind struck, it was like a refreshing gust of air conditioning on a hot day. The hoarse murmurs around him, compared to the evil god, were like coquettish whining. And then there was the pollution power that countless feared. Su Qi even felt his affinity for pollution power. These pollutions would not affect his spirit at all. Instead, with a light touch from him, the power of pollution seemed to dance along. Damn! I've really become an abyss believer, Su Qi whispered inwardly. Of course, this was just a jest. Su Qi knew well why this was happening. The part of the rampaging evil god's power within him had already begun to subtly emanate. This was not a good thing. The closer the abyss's power was to him, the more it meant that he could barely suppress this portion of power and was becoming more like the evil god. Now, he was like a keg of gunpowder or perhaps a puppet. The next outbreak would inevitably be the last. However, Su Qi never worried. He had naturally been planning his trump cards against it for a long time, ready for whatever might happen. Swish, swish, swish. The group soared over the streets, and at this moment, the endless end ahead finally began to change. The so-called lost hell here, given the current strength, was nothing to them. This is just the beginning, like a threshold on the periphery of Demon Land. Only by passing it will we truly enter Demon Land. Qinxing casually spoke. Moreover, it seems our luck is not too good. He reached out his hand and picked up the jade used for contact before. The path we've taken is the most roundabout, and the twisted distance is also long. We've spent a bit too much time here, which results in us being the slowest. Anyone entering the Lost Land, if not following it closely like them, would most likely encounter various different scenes. Naturally, as the pollution on the periphery was approximately the same concentration, the strength of the weird encountered was roughly the same. At this moment, they had already left the long street behind them, with the street directly twisted and vanishing from sight, surrounding by interlocking lost fragments once more. But this time, everyone could feel something different. Brother Su, can you feel it? Jiangji's complexion slightly darkened. The pollution here is more severe and... He lowered his head, his ears twitched, and spoke in a deep voice. The whispers are more pronounced. We must constantly be careful not to be affected. Otherwise, our spiritual power will be reduced. And everyone else felt this, their expressions showing no surprise. Qinxing then turned his head gently and looked at everyone calmly. The closer we get to the inside, the stronger the pollution power will be, and the greater the impact on our spiritual power. I just need you to do one thing. That is, after being affected, no matter what weirdness or illusions you see, Do not act brashly but instead focus on our own divinity. Qinqing's tone, although increasingly calm, carried a hint of sharpness. Of course, as we approach the core, even the divinity, even that of the divine race's God's son, will be affected and can't be trusted. Divinity isn't omnipotent. It's just not now. Then, besides some other methods, what's more important is relying on your own will and spiritual power. Lu Fan and Rab swallowed hard, a hint of retreat in their hearts. Can we go that far? They were actually already somewhat affected by now. After all, the two of them were just ordinary adventurers who had stumbled into this luxury chariot, thinking it was an opportunity, but now they found they couldn't keep up at all. At this very moment, the two of them could hear many hoarse whispers already appearing by their ears, unsettling, fear involuntarily spreading in their hearts. Although they hadn't seen anything of major impact, they felt panicked, doubting their ability to go much further. You too. Achia also noticed them. If it's really too much, you can stay here. Indeed, your strength can't keep up? Qinqing looked around. This place is already enough for your exploration. With ancient battlefield fragments from the Sky Dome merging in, more fragments will be poured here. And the light points that pour out are no longer the previously defective, consumable ones. They are complete relics, scenes. Whatever fortune you get is up to your own fate. Qinqing could see clearly that aside from the one called Su Buxian and the later arrival, Jiang Ji, only they could truly be considered Annan's companions. The other two, they were just there to make up the numbers. However, he didn't underestimate Annan for this. Before knowing the true identity of a divine son, one must always be cautious. Lu Fan and Rab looked somewhat unwilling. They wanted to go further, to finally make contact with a real powerhouse and walk the same path, an opportunity to change their ordinary fates. But recklessly forging ahead was also akin to courting death. We can only... Rab clenched his fists. Don't be hasty. Su Qi spoke softly. I'll teach you a trick to resist whispers and some other miscellaneous spiritual power shocks. Jiang Ji was somewhat surprised. Brother Su, you're skilled in spiritual power too? In his memory, he'd never seen Su Buxian use any abilities related to spiritual power. Well, let's say that is actually my area of expertise, Su Qi said lightly. This time, speaking the truth had to be believed, right? So how do we do it? At this moment, even Qinqing looked over. They had a spiritual power sequencer in their team. Only he knew. Those whispers and spiritual pollution, things even a professional spiritual power sequencer couldn't claim to resolve, yet here was Su Buxian saying he could withstand them. If so, it must rely on some powerful spiritual power tool or equipment. Just as he was thinking this, he suddenly noticed that Su Qi had only taken out a lollipop, holding it in his hard grip, and solemnly said to the two, "Follow me and chant. Demons and ghosts, quickly depart. Demons and ghosts, quickly depart." Qinqing was silent, turning to his team's spiritual power sequencer. Is this some kind of spiritual power tool? No. The spiritual power user glanced at Annan and hesitated. It's just an ordinary lollipop. It looks more like food. There isn't any power fluctuation. Qinqing remained silent. Brother Annan, this subordinate of yours, is a spiritual power user? Annan felt a bit awkward but needed to find some plausible excuse for Brother Su. He tentatively said, "Perhaps." Upon hearing this, Qinqing once again sank into silence. He shifted his gaze back to Su Buxian. Although there were no power fluctuations or signs of spiritual power manifestation. However, Lu Fan and Rab, seeming unaware of this, solemnly took the two lollipops and began to earnestly mimic, "Demons and ghosts, quickly depart. Demons and ghosts, quickly depart." Everyone fell silent, with only the repetitious chant of the two filling the air. Qinqing glanced silently at Annan, only to find that he too was struggling to maintain composure. He sighed inwardly. Annan's reactions upon contact were quite normal, but that subordinate called Su Buxian was completely different from his own, a lot more casual and unpredictable, and seemingly not as reverent to higher divine sons as one might expect. He is probably trying to give them a suggestion, the spiritual power user whispered. Such a suggestion is tantamount to self-hypnosis, potentially strengthening their will and increasing resistance against will-eroding spiritual power assaults. It's a good idea, but a waste of time. He shook his head lightly. This is the abyss. It's pollution, not something that can be resolved through hypnosis. To combat pollution's power, one needs to confront it with spiritual power, not just words. Anan didn't speak. Though he was aware of this, having witnessed various tactics from Su Qi, he still held a trace of trust. For instance, problems within the ancient gate that neither demigods including Senior Black Cat could solve were rectified by Brother Su. Let's not waste any more time, said the spiritual power user, shaking his head. This can't possibly work. If it did, what's the use of me cultivating spiritual power? And in that moment, Lu Fan and Rab suddenly paused and murmured, Wait, it seems to really work. The whispers in my ears have vanished, and the unease and fear that filled me have been swept away. The spiritual power user's eyes widened. Darn, it actually bloody worked. What the heck is it? The spiritual power user couldn't help but look toward the lollipop in their hands. Although he knew it was rude to probe into others' belongings excessively, but, damn, he was really curious. As a spiritual power user, he was very sensitive to various spiritual powers, but damn it, he hadn't felt the slightest fluctuation just now. This object must have something special about it. Indeed, Su Qi said softly. This thing, although it looks very ordinary, it does have a special aspect. He peeled open the lollipop and popped it into his mouth. It's hot pot flavored, and it's a limited edition. Su Qi just chuckled softly. Where the heart goes, there the echo follows. Qinsheng calmly withdrew his gaze, saying lightly, Let's go. The journey continues. Although his subordinates were very curious about what the other had done, it actually wasn't important. They had merely cleared ordinary adventurers of the pollution's whisper. The priority was to move forward. It seems that everyone behind us has already arrived. But that's not important either. Time is not of the essence here. Qinsheng looked toward the twisted pollution. Finding a high-level holy artifact first, and being able to fight for it, that is the key. The group continued to move forward. Lu Fan and Rab occasionally murmured the phrase under their breath, as if it really was effective. Su Qi looked at Jiang Ji's peculiar gaze and smiled lightly. If you wish, you could chant it too. Allow me to refuse. It feels a little embarrassing. Jiang Ji understood Su Qi, and moreover, you must have used other methods. The candy and words are not necessary. Su Qi shook his head. You, still so stubborn, but I believe. Believe what? Jiang Ji felt somewhat uneasy. Honestly, the surrounding pollution hadn't affected him. But at this moment, Su Qi's words made him feel anxious. He smiled faintly. I believe that one day, you'll join me in chanting this phrase. Su Qi smiled slightly and withdrew his gaze from Jiang Ji's resistant expression. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to sense any spiritual fluctuations. After all, he hadn't used his spiritual eyes or any other spiritual power. He simply intervened with words against the pollution numerous times. This was an experiment in itself. As said before, this place felt like home, what countless others feared as pollution. For the evil god, it was no more troublesome than a sprite. With that in mind, Su Qi had a thought. Could he try to control or command this kind of pollution? And the result of the experiment. In his vision, there was a mark on both Rab and Lu Fan, a phantom image formed by the evil god's eye, silent and unnoticeable. Similarly, the pollution around wouldn't affect them. The experiment was a success, yet not completely so, because he had to be present, and when the two chanted those words, it actually should be a prayer of faith in the evil god. The original phrase was, Lord, I offer everything, etc. Then he altered it to, demons and evils, leave us be. Don't say it. It really did work. But the strength of the abyss would notice something was amiss, so it could only be used for a while, and the area of influence was limited. Now I'm like the evil god's room manager. Su Qi looked toward the demon land. I'll help you manage this place well. At this very moment, in another place, millions of heavenly destiny people are gathering. Nancy was among them, in this vast crowd, solemnly looking toward the distant, black and white hourglass. And within the hourglass appeared a middle-aged man with an imposing presence, dressed in loose-fitting clothes, his image projected within. He said gently, "The moment the world tree blooms, what will be born is a chance that concerns the entire future. We are competing for heavenly destiny, the abyss for destruction, and countless other beings for the future. At that time, all the current situations will change." Nancy gazed at the enormous projection before her. The middle-aged man was one of the priests from the god's palace. As a heavenly destiny person, although her previous experiences had been somewhat bitter, she could only trudge on alone, like a pilgrimage to the western heaven, holding a world tree leaf and following the guidance to this place. But, arriving here, Nancy saw hope. The god's palace itself was the largest strength in the present world able to confront the abyss. All the heavenly destiny people gather to fight against the abyss for themselves and for everything they possess in the present world. It's just. Nancy looked at the hourglass. The sand inside was divided into black and white, with black clearly outnumbering white and falling faster. It was like the falling and melting of the ancient battlefield fragments into the demon land. Recovery. Burst. The prologue unfolds. Chaos is approaching. Nancy sighed softly. Where will the hustler's chamber of commerce go from here? After all, it was his blood, sweat, and efforts, a business into which he had poured his all. After the outbreak of chaos, there would no longer be such a good opportunity to develop it. And Su Buxian, who has been missing for so long. Nancy gritted her teeth. Self-proclaimed sect hierarch of the hustlers' sect, doing nothing, those little guys, all of them aren't managed as well. He was referring to people like Bai Yilan, with whom he had spoken at length about Su Buxian, knowing that this guy was again playing the absentee landlord. This time, however, Nancy exhaled again, looking towards the abyssal gap in the distance. Countless heavenly destiny people were waiting for the opportunity. You should stop worrying about it. This time, anybody who came would be just ants in the torrent, and the only ones who could make a difference were truly expansive forces, powerful races, and even gods. Under the outburst, they would merely be ants carrying the mission of the present world, but if they could contribute even a little bit of strength, that would also be a confrontation with the abyss. The priest before her was also one of the awakened members of the god's palace, coming from a temple to guide some of the heavenly destiny people. After all, the abyss had always been strategizing behind the scenes. The god's palace couldn't possibly be unprepared, and previously the heavenly destiny people scattered, each facing various hardships and dangers. And now they had also become the regular army, the leaves on each person flickering slightly. If the heavenly destiny people could just survive, they would also be able to receive cultivation from the countless powers within the god's palace. This was also Nancy's little selfishness. He wanted to find a backup for the hustler's chamber of commerce, which was why he became a heavenly destiny person. Su Buxian. Nancy whispered a silent chuckle in his heart. The hustler's sect seems to be not as good as the hustler's chamber of commerce, huh? Did you just mock me in your mind? Su Qi looked at Zhang Ji. Zhang Ji cursed under his breath. I mock you, and I need to do it in my mind? That's true. Su Qi said to himself. I just felt a bit of an odd sensation from the unseen. If it's not mockery, then it predicts that something big is coming. Zhang Ji, how does mocking you count as something big? Half an hour later, he couldn't help but look ahead. Boom! A tremendous light crashed down. Amidst the pollution of the demon land, it scattered in all directions like heavenly girls scattering flowers, visible to everyone through the lost and twisted reality, even if it only flickered for less than a minute before fading. But this also seemed to point everyone in the direction. Qinsheng and Anan's expressions tightened. It has appeared. This is the phenomenon triggered by the falling of the ancient battlefield fragment. There are various opportunities in every place, as I said before. Everyone, keep close. Qinsheng, however, had a clear target, calmly stating, "A high-level holy artifact is among them." "I told you my prediction was accurate," Su Qi said to himself. Beside him, Jiang Ji looked back at the ancient battlefield fragment in the sky dome. Hearing these words, he could not help but turn back. Half an hour later, that counts as a prediction? What's the problem? Can't weather forecasts predict rain tomorrow? Jiang Ji? ? Can that be the same? You say it will rain, and when it rains a year later, you claim you predicted it. Don't manage that. Just say whether it's accurate or not, Su Qi said with a lazy chuckle. Jiang Ji. He suddenly felt that arguing with Su Qi was a sign of his own immaturity. At this moment, Qinsheng quietly spoke. Now, we may not only face strange fragments but also need to be wary of others. His eyes were lit with a resolute battle spirit. Those divine sons are not the kind to back down easily. And Nan clenched his fists. He had already recovered his spiritual energy, and this was precisely the stage he wanted. Qi and the others also carried a hint of battle intent. Although they were Taoist guardians, they were also young members who grew up alongside the divine sons. Even Jiang Ji could not help but feel a surge of excitement. All the past heavenly prides of the Meteor Alliance, including himself, had fallen. What they longed for was to stand on a higher stage. Lu Fan and Rab, they decided to assist. And Su Qi looked into the distance. Though he seemed a bit lazy, he was actually overwhelmed by the commotion. Naturally, the source of the noise was the Luo Shinfu. He exclaimed excitedly, "Daozi! I feel it. The breath of the immortal path. Among those countless falling spheres of light, there's the aura of our immortal path dimension. It's very likely a fragment of the immortal path dimension, or possibly an item, or even immortal origin," he said, somewhat excited. "If we can find it and secure it, the immortal path steel could reveal a trace of inscription, and you, Daozi, could initiate the immortal way sequence and control immortal techniques." I got it. Su Qi, rarely seeing Luo Shinfu so emotionally moved, looked towards the sky dome. "Shao-O, that ancient battlefield fragment, it's complicated, isn't it? There are people like you from Fantasy Country trapped inside, as well as others from different dimensions." He smiled faintly. "Are those trapped here not simple beings?" Shao cursed under his breath. "Don't ask me, I don't know. Ask again and I'll kill myself." Quite a temper. However, this was Shao's taboo, so Su Qi smiled faintly and did not pursue the matter. But in fact, from the information ? Above its head, it was almost certain. That fragment of the ancient battlefield must be very special, not only containing people from the 12 dimensions, but also many unspeakable secrets. Otherwise, the god of anxiety and the lord of blood demon wouldn't have gone to such great lengths, using their powers to seal it away. Now, from the scene just witnessed, it was evident that the fragment of the ancient battlefield was unsealing and merging with the demon land. Given this, it was possible for all kinds of beings inside to fall into the demon land, get twisted, lose their way, and become sealed. I wonder if I'll encounter people from the Divine Machinery Kingdom, or the Immortal Path Dimension. He himself now held the core of 2 dimensions, although he couldn't exert even a fraction of their strength, but rounding up, he could consider himself half a dimension's person. Seeing one's fellow villagers, tears well up in one's eyes. Of course, if the other side wanted the core, Su Qi could also tell them righteously, "This I picked up. What I picked up is mine. Let's go." Everyone at that moment had already set off toward the front, and the road through the twisted and lost was not easy to travel, for various twisted illusions could appear at any time. For instance, a steam train racing across from the horizon, or a horde of zombies suddenly pouncing, and the cliff breaking away underfoot. Most of these were illusions, a common phenomenon in the twisted and lost. For those in the lost land, the most important rule was not to believe. It's not about clenching one's teeth and ignoring it, but really not believing from the bottom of one's heart, not being frightened by all sorts of strange sights. This was not something that could be done easily. Amidst the whispers in one's ears, the eerie cold wind, within the unsettling pollution, everyone's nerves would be on edge, and the sudden appearance of a cliff underfoot would make any normal person's body tense up. At first, they might just break out in cold sweat, but this was actually a sign of being polluted, a prelude to a decline in mental strength. Occasionally experiencing this, like the proverbial frog in slowly boiling water, one would unknowingly become suspicious and uneasy, gradually falling into disarray. That is the cunning strength of the pollution. However, the ones present were not ordinary people. Except for Lu Fan and Rab, all had various means to resist, not easily falling into the trap. And at the moment, the intensity was not too high. Even if Lu Fan and Rab did not have Suchi's help, they could persist for a considerable distance. Of course, by then they might already be half collapsed. At this very moment, from all directions centered around the demon land, a massive number of people were pouring in. Whether it was the leading divine sons or the other teams gathering behind, they had now entered the demon land and witnessed the descent of the myriad spheres of light, including Old Huang and his party who were in another direction. Bad, very bad. Old Huang and the others were different. It sighed and lamented as it observed everything in front of it. This has really gone bad. It muttered. The several pillars of the abyss are bursting. The god's palace is also moving accordingly. It's like a world mill grinding everything. It will crush the entire existing structure. Damn it! I shouldn't have come here. It knew better than anyone the horrors of this place, what terrifying events could unfold. Of course, this massive upheaval also came with equivalent opportunities. The saying that fortune favors the bold held true. If someone were to gain something during this time, their future destiny would be completely transformed. But who were they? They were people who had amassed countless resources and had immense backgrounds to struggle among themselves. There was no place for ordinary people. From the very beginning, its only thought was to lead everyone to just linger on the edges. Who would have expected to be caught by Su Buxian? And then there was the messenger of the sect hierarch. Old Huang's gaze shifted to the distance, where other members of the Hustlers sect were teaching T0. It pressed its forehead, totally biased, all led astray. But it's still okay. Old Huang took a deep breath. Although the burst this time was terrifying, in reality, only the top forces could participate, and Su Buxian always thought he could get a foot in the door. Just some minor disturbances from one person won't stir up any waves. There wouldn't be a repeat of the previous situation in the Anxious Land. After all, that was a mechanism, a trial with the support of the power of the God's Palace. But here, it involved the participation of countless forces, a hard confrontation of backgrounds. It knew, in the context of true backgrounds, just how powerless one person could be. That guy probably won't even have the chance to participate. It murmured to itself. This is the safest path. Why can't everyone just muddle through outside? Isn't that fine? The Hustlers sect was just starting out, without any real strength or qualifications to contend, seeking to step onto such a stage. In Old Huang's view, it was wishful thinking. The only path now was steady development, to lay low during this chaotic time, to grow step by step. That was the plan it had set. Su Buxian. This time just stay calm and wait for the curtain to fall. Old Huang whispered softly to itself. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, in the demon land, Qinqing and the others were already thrust into battle, facing a massive and strange creature before them. This too fell from above. Did you notice the weapon lodged in its chest? That's an immortal item. Kill it. This bizarre creature, huge in size and facing the siege of the group, exhibited terrifying traits of thick skin and flesh. Strength sufficient to annihilate a group of adventurers merely caused it to suffer cuts and bruises, exposing dark blood flowers. And it was rapidly self-healing. This doesn't seem the same as those pollution monsters. Jiang Ji was also outputting damage beside Su Qi, growling, not primarily spiritual in power, its body is terrifyingly strong. Jie glanced over, speaking coldly, normal. The abyss might produce any kind of monster, pollution, chaotic, anxiety, blood demon. It's clear. This is the power of the god of chaos. Qinsheng spoke calmly, looking up at the fragments of the ancient battlefield in the sky dome. Prepare yourselves mentally. What comes next is unpredictable. And Su Qi was also attacking at this moment, using Dark Star to sneak in attacks quietly. An abomination born from chaotic power. Su Qi murmured to himself, "That's a treasure trove." The Starfire potion he created in Duan's world was made by allowing Dark Star to devour chaotic liquid, which was then researched and modified. But there wasn't much chaotic liquid. The progress was there, but it was slow, lacking in mass data, and now it was being delivered to his doorstep. Currently, these were two important cards of the Hustlers sect. Starfire Technology, Starfire Potion. Just waiting for this prelude to end, the Hustlers sect would be able to play these two cards for extraordinary effects. Of course, the premise was, one must stand up, not just stand up, but stand at the forefront. Boom! The massive blast kept resounding. This terrifying chaotic monster, although it didn't have any high-level holy artifact on its body, had an item of immortal quality, which was a reward. Qinsheng and the others might not care for it, but Qi and the rest were attacking with all their might. Su Qi, on the other hand, was continuously using Dark Star to plunder the monster's chaotic energy. Normally, it wouldn't be so easy. Plunder would have to happen when the opponent was weak. Now, everyone just happened to be making it easier for Su Qi. Back and forth. The pressure on them was also decreasing. It seems to be getting weaker. Its body isn't as strong as before. Its self-healing speed is also slowing down. Wait, Brother Su. It's coming for you. The monster let out a roar of rage. Surprisingly, it charged directly and recklessly towards Su Qi. Brother Su, watch out. Anan shouted instinctively. Jiangxi's eyes bulged. Wait a minute. I'm right next to him. I should be careful too. Aren't you going to warn me? At this moment, this colossal monster charged like a towering building, with an incredibly high speed. He had no time for complaints. Such a powerful creature. A group of people had attacked it for so long without killing it. That terrifying self-healing ability was extremely shocking, and its charge was as deadly as something of Sequence 6. It certainly was not simple. The next moment, the ground shook violently. One could see a large amount of dark liquid on the body of the monster, suddenly stretching out countless monstrous hands. Like a domain, it rapidly expanded, and with the force of thunder, it pounced towards Su Qi and the others. In a flash, it directly dragged about a dozen people centered on Su Qi right in, and Nan exclaimed in surprise, "A domain! Isn't that something only the extraordinary can possess? Why does it have one?" Generally speaking, domains began to take shape at Sequence 6, and only after crossing that threshold into the extraordinary did they unfold. But now, the monster before them actually had a domain. Qinsheng's cold gaze was fixed on the darkened chaotic air balloons before him. Not just Su Qi, but also his people were wrapped up in the unfolded domain. They couldn't see what exactly was happening inside, but every second was likely urgent. This is a kind of domain-like ability, but it's from chaotic liquid, generated by the ability, akin to how pollution monsters can release weird abilities that twist people's minds. It's a derivative of the power produced by the god of chaos, and naturally, it'll exhibit its abilities. This place is a gathering point for abyss power, and it really shouldn't be underestimated. Anything could happen, Qinsheng muttered softly to himself. And Nan looked gravely at the huge dark balloon formed by the chaotic liquid. Never mind that for now. How do we rescue them? Don't panic. This chaotic energy erodes the body, possessing those enveloped by the chaotic liquid, and gradually transforms them into chaotic monsters. It's not that fast. Qinsheng stood unmoving, extending his hand, and the sand suddenly burst forth, transforming into 100-meter sand spike. Whoosh! It stabbed right into the huge chaotic balloon of the monstrous entity. The massive chaotic balloon paused only slightly, and then it actually absorbed it. The voluminous liquid fused the just-formed sand spike right into it. This is the terror of chaos. Qinsheng's eyes darkened. All things are easily integrated by it, and Nan obviously couldn't sit idly by. With a clap of his hands, he was ready to unleash his ultimate move. During the previous fight, he hadn't used it even against Qi, and now Brother Su and the others were caught up in this terrifying abyssal liquid. He certainly wouldn't hold back, and Qinsheng watched calmly, his posture straight, as his gourd behind him suddenly enlarged, preparing to unveil his trump card, as after all, his subordinates were also caught up in this. But the next moment, boom! A muffled sound emanated from within the gigantic hundreds of meters wide chaotic dark sphere. Subsequently, in front of their eyes, this erupting chaotic domain-like entity began to struggle wildly. Various twisted fluctuations continually appeared. In less than the time it takes for 5 breaths, they heard a blood-curdling scream. The scream was shrill, fearful, despairing, and carried with it the smell of blood that permeated the air. Everyone's faces changed. Who died? The domain was now slowly contracting, and amidst the twisting, it suddenly opened. The next moment, the interior was revealed, along with the collapsed body of the monster. The monster's body not only lacked any sign of life, but it was also obviously shrunken more than tenfold compared to before, as if it had been drained dry. The chaotic monster is dead? Qinsheng looked surprised. Qi, what happened? Who did this? Qi slapped his swollen head, still in a daze. I don't know. After I was dragged in, I couldn't see anything, as if I was covered in sticky liquid. It felt like I was going to fall into a swamp, suffocating me. Then, after a few muffled sounds, it became like this. Qinsheng looked over, noticing the confused looks on everyone's faces. He narrowed his eyes slightly, turning also to a just as perplexed Su Qi. You're Su Buxian, right? Did you notice anything off just now? Qinsheng asked one more question. After all, it seemed like the monster had gone berserk for no reason, lunging in the direction where Su Qi and the others were, even unleashing its trump card. Yet, Su Qi simply shook his head and spread his hands. Like Brother Qi, I also dunno. Could it be because of this? Jiangji extended his hand, which held the weapon that had been stuck in the body of the monster. The moment it lunged at us, I struggled and instinctively grabbed this, and then I pulled it out with all my might. Qinsheng's pupils twitched slightly. He still had his doubts, murmuring, Is that so? This chaotic liquid is a bone-clinging maggot, parasitic in nature. Although it provides great strength to the body, it also gradually devours everything about the host. I only have partial information about such abyssal power from family archives, and I'm unaware of the rest. He spoke softly. Maybe it's just like you said, that the weapon embedded in its body was its weak point. Well then, let's consider this matter closed for now, and be even more cautious moving forward. We shall depart immediately. Jiang Ji glanced at the weapon in his hands, hesitating slightly. You have broken its life gate, so naturally, it belongs to you. Qinsheng also spoke softly. This is also the consensus in Shensi, and I reached beforehand. And Nan nodded, his gaze shifting to see Jiang Ji's expression still somewhat strange, which surprised him. He spoke in the Starfire chat channel exclusive to the 3 of them. Jiang Ji, my brother, just take it. Although the immortal item is highly valuable, we had already discussed the distribution method beforehand. You breached its life gate, no problem. I'm not thinking it's without reason, nor do I feel it's unjust. Jiang Ji said quietly. It's because the answer I just gave to Lord Divine Sun was false. None? Jiang Ji looked towards Su Qi. I just saw your contact with the monster, and then all the chaotic liquid I just mentioned surged madly and got absorbed by you. Although this thing is in my hand, it has nothing to do with me. His expression stern. And Brother Su? Are you still Brother Su now? And Nan was somewhat disconcerted. Wait, Brother Su absorbing? Yes, absorbing. Jiang Ji coldly. I'm afraid the chaotic. It wasn't killed, but chose a new host. And Nan's face suddenly paled, aware of the terror of the chaotic liquid. Even a little bit of chaotic was enough to create a terrifying monster. Not to mention, that one just now, there was even something like a domain presence. And Nan said in a low voice, that thing must not be touched, if it really has been possessed. The power of the abyss was truly terrifying. Aside from those who truly followed its power, sacrificing a price to gain immense strength and forever being disciples of the abyss, others who touched it only invited disaster, being dragged into the corrupted abyss. Who are you now? At that moment, Jiang Ji's expression was extremely solemn and serious. He was ready, determined to bring Brother Su back. At this very moment, everyone was still on the way, and nobody noticed the heavy atmosphere in the chat channel among the three of them. And Su Qi slowly raised his head, his profound eyes making them nervous. I am. Both were nervous. Your father. Both were stunned. What the hell? Su Qi lightly said, you really can imagine things. Jiang Ji was silent for a moment, still not completely convinced, and said solemnly, but what I just saw, how do you explain that? The chaotic liquid is the power of the abyss. Like pollution, it is a deadly and dangerous terror. Like a drug, many people afflicted without even knowing, turned into ghosts, bizarre, abnormal, all unknowing. TCH. Su Qi lightly clicked his tongue. Well, how should I say this? It seems I can't pass it off as an illusion now, but since you've seen it, let me be honest. I am the great abyss broadcaster. The evil god is my top rank. The god of anxiety my second. Third is chaotic, fourth is blood. That's your idea of being honest? Jiang Ji almost yelled. Isn't that reasonable? Su Qi spread his hands. It's precisely with the help of the leaderboard, Big Brother, that I could absorb the chaotic liquid. Jiang Ji rolled his eyes. Now he could probably be sure. This was indeed still Brother Su, and it didn't seem to be affected by the chaotic, morphing into an abnormal possessed. Many people affected don't realize the various changes in themselves, sinister, bizarre, cruel, which is why after many worlds collapse, they turn into horrors. And Nan also stepped forward to say at this moment, I inspected with divinity and it seems like Brother Su indeed hasn't been affected in that way. It seems like it might not be what you thought, Jiang Ji. Jiang Ji asked, Brother Su, can you explain? Su Qi spread his hands. Haven't I explained already? You don't believe me. Jiang Ji sighed, despairingly shaking his head. Here I thought, having joined the Hustlers sect and being your companion for so long, we had some camaraderie, yet you still brush me off. You're just kidding, right? These days, being an honest person is really hard. No one believes whatever you say. Couldn't I, the hierarch of the Hustlers sect, lie? Before, Su Qi might still have concealed, but arriving here, he knew the stage he had to set. So, far from concealing, he even had to start building momentum, setting a grand and far-reaching standard for everyone in the Hustlers sect. But, unfortunately, no one believed. Fine, Su Qi said nonchalantly. Then just assume I have special means to temporarily seal that chaotic liquid. Reasonable. Jiang Ji gave a thumbs up. You go to the kids' table. Su Qi calmly stated. I didn't expect you to see it inside. Su Qi, stroking his chin and squinting slightly at the immortal-level weapon in Jiang Ji's hand, said, It seems to be because of this thing. It was precisely because at that moment, after Jiang Ji had touched it, he could see what Su Qi had been doing in the chaotic swamp. Jiang Ji touched his head. Really? I still don't know what it's for. No information box popped up either. Su Qi glanced a few times. It's a nice treasure. Keep it. It was likely not only of immortal quality but also had other special properties, and it wasn't that Jiang Ji had grabbed it, but rather it had moved toward Jiang Ji. This is the unique chance of each individual, a clever choice of its own. I thought you were going to ask me to hand it over. Jiang Ji couldn't help but complain. What do you take me for as the sect hierarch? Su Qi pondered. But I really should collect some sales tax. Jiang Ji? Be a human. although Jiang Ji and Anan both did not believe the true argument Su Qi had just made. But, at this moment, Xiao O and Luo Shenfu were all ears. Everything that had just happened had been seen by them. Luo Shenfu, naturally, had not heard Su Qi mention the abyss for the first time. He vaguely recalled, Daozi always took a casual attitude toward the abyss, familiar with the names of various abyss gods. However, he also didn't believe. His own Daozi had been unreliable for more than a day or two, and he had long been accustomed to it unless the gods of the abyss really appeared. Unlikely indeed. This formation had nothing to do with Daozi. And Xiao also didn't believe a bit, thinking to itself, it's still the same argument. Is there any point in repeating it? Who in their right mind would believe? Su Qi could see the question marks over their heads and sighed lightly. Alas, beneath my throne, not one person of trust. At this time, Qinxing and Anan suddenly looked moved and picked up the jade talisman in their hands. An eyebrow slightly raised. A high-level holy artifact. They've found it already. From all directions heading toward Demon Land, people had already encountered various manifestations of abyss power, including abnormal pollution monsters and high-order demons. Of course, some had also witnessed various scenes of ancient battlefield fragments. All were dilapidated, cruel, bloody, with pits of thousands of corpses, countless suspended coffins, and bodies with eyes open in death. Naturally, although the number of high-level holy artifacts was not large compared to others, and their locations were unclear, as soon as anyone stumbled upon one, it would draw a crowd. Half a day later, nearly 50 high-level holy artifacts had been successively located throughout the Demon Land. But getting to them was not so easy, because these high-level holy artifacts were surrounded by twisted oddities, and they were also imbued with various strange rules. In other words, the sites of these high-level holy artifacts were like an instance that needed to be decoded, with everyone racking their brains and exerting all their strength. Each high-level holy artifact was in a different place, producing various rules and oddities. Even the Divine Sun could not bypass the rules here. For a time, it actually trapped everyone there. Don't say it, really, don't say it. Obtaining a high-level holy artifact is indeed not that simple. Jiang Ji was sitting near a huge lake, surrounded by various groups of people who had gathered around the shore. Everyone stationed at the shore looked indifferently toward the distant lake surface, exhibiting a mix of greed and apprehension. Ah Qi said, I've just inquired around. A day has passed, and it seems no one has obtained the high-level holy artifact? Not even those divine sons, or even the sons of the divine race? Jiang Ji said, somewhat surprised. Qinxing, sitting beside with eyes closed and meditating, calmly said upon hearing this, they're not anxious. Obtaining the high-level holy artifact means progressing further, and no one wants to step into that place so soon. He pointed his hand toward the center of Demon Land. That's not a place where a group of people can enter safely. And Nan softly said, so, they desire the struggle, yet they fear the abyss, wanting to get more people involved to use as tools in the exploration? That's quite calculating. His gaze turned to the lake. The lake was vast. A thin mist floated above the water, obscuring the view and casting a shadowy haze. Though there were ripples, the overall water surface was calm. And calmness meant something was amiss. The high-level holy artifact is right at the center of this lake. People had ventured into the lake from the beginning, at a distance seeing a small cabin floating in the middle. And inside was the faint glow emitted by the high-level holy artifacts. It seemed to signal to everyone that whoever reached the cabin first would obtain it. However, a day had passed, and many people had gathered, yet no one had succeeded. Because something about the lake was off. Once stepped on, spiritual energy would be restrained, and various eerie incidents would occur. There were divine sons who approached within a kilometer of the cabin, but only stood outside for a few seconds before their expressions tensed and they quickly retreated. Qinxing cast his eyes toward the various teams of divine sons in the distance. That guy must have seen something. That's why he chose not to open the cabin. But he refuses to say. Some disbelieving, using their abilities, tried to forcefully reach the cabin door, but as they approached, the lake started forming huge waves. This was usual noise. However, everyone calmed down. The cabin and its surroundings carried a lethal aura, not a place that could be easily entered. At this very moment, people still attempted, gathering all kinds of information to break the enigma. That cabin is very eerie, Brother Su. I can see a great amount of blood energy. Jiang Ji looked towards the center of the lake, and although obscured by the mist, he could faintly discern its outline. Moreover, Jiang Ji, holding the immortal-level weapon he had acquired, could also see a great amount of blood energy. It's as if a great amount of resentment has converged. You can see it too? Qinsheng slightly tilted his head to look at Jiang Ji. His gaze slowly lowered to the weapon in Jiang Ji's hand. It seems due to the weapon you just obtained. I and brother and have also used divinity, and noticed the eerie atmosphere here. So much resentment in this place. And the surroundings of the cabin are terrifyingly ominous with a lethal essence. His eyes narrowed with seriousness. This is also why the Divine Sons aren't attempting it lightly. Another Divine Son glanced and immediately withdrew. That guy must have perceived some great terror. However, retreating temporarily, he did not leave but started to prepare various strategies. Jiang Ji turned back, looking at the nonchalantly standing Su Qi. Brother Su, what do you think? I stand here watching. No, I'm not. Su Qi paused. I think what you guys have said is right. There indeed is something off about this place. Obtaining that high-level holy artifact is indeed not simple. Needs grasping 3 requirements, 5 basics. Jiang Ji. Everyone is trying to figure something out, and here you are surely at your philosophical best, talking as if it has anything to do with what we were just discussing. Never mind, he is the sect hierarch, can't be provoked. And Su Qi here wasn't truly being nonchalant. His gaze focused on the cabin in front, listening to the grave warnings from Luo Shenfu. A tremendous amount of death energy. This profound death energy has directly converged to form the lake, which underneath is all corpses. Luo Shenfu coldly said, such tremendous death energy. It's like a huge formation. The cabin must surely house a terrifying presence. Daozi, don't approach lightly. Those without divinity can't withstand the death energy. Luo Shenfu gravely warned. Those Divine Sons aren't daring to venture into danger because they too acknowledge the risks. All right. Su Qi gently agreed, his eyes scanning over everyone, various adventurers, forces, and teams of Divine Sons. Then his gaze rested on that cabin. His eyes, sharp as torches. From the moment he saw the cabin, Su Qi knew what it was. It was the same cabin he had first woken up in when he entered the first instance. That was the beginning of everything. Su Qi knew he might see it again, but didn't expect it to be here. Moreover, without needing anyone else's warning, Su Qi's spiritual eyes could also see the astonishing death energy surrounding this cabin. Su Qi clearly remembered finding a pit of corpses beneath the floorboards the first time. Expanding demonization multiplied 1,000-fold, 10,000-fold. Su Qi looked down beneath the lake's surface. His spiritual eyes could easily penetrate the lake's barrier, clearly seeing the corpse mountain and blood sea, where the number of corpses was 10,000 times more than what he had seen before. How many more people have been killed? Su Qi's gaze surveyed the scene. Killing Demon Town remained Killing Demon Town, even though it had been demonized, transformed by abyss power into an immensely terrifying place. But human nature does not change that group of killing demons, from wanting to kill him, to being burned alive by his fire. Even in pain and struggle, their eyes still shone with madness, bloodthirst, and hatred. Even as the hunter, butcher, and woodcutter died, they only glared at him with venomous eyes. Hatred maxed out. Born with the traits of a demon, no wonder they worshipped the chief abyss evil god. At that time, there was only one who was scared away, the man who stood watch at the entrance and exit of the town. He was the only one to escape Su Qi's clutches. That didn't sound quite right. In any case, he was the only one who lived and saw the scene of him kicking the evil god's head and the ground littered with corpses. At the same time, he also saw the phantom of the evil god, But at the moment the phantom appeared, his mind was already directly destroyed by the endless abyss power, his death somewhat inexplicable. Now the demon was him, and also the only one who would instinctively fear and run at the sight of him. Others, Su Qi could not say for sure. They probably would be filled with hatred upon seeing him. What is everyone waiting for now? Jiang Ji couldn't help but look at the people here. Some adventurers were scattered, thinking of stepping onto the lake to try, but the truly powerful ones had not moved, seemingly waiting for something. Because many divine sons and powers, including Princess Chenxing, are waiting for the news of those two divine sons. Qi spoke up. Wherever they are, people will make way for the high-level holy artifact they possess. Jiang Ji paused. Before he came here, the city he had been in was relatively remote. Moreover, the number of advanced holy artifacts indicated in this direction was only just over 10, not comparable to those in other cities, so there was hardly any competition. Therefore, the news of divine sons appearing here made many people hesitate. Wait! Jiang Ji frowned. Although divine sons have big reputations, it doesn't mean everyone should avoid them, right? Qi shook his head. Princess Chenxing said, divine sons have tiers of strength and backgrounds as well. One of those two is from the heavenly court, the other is from Infinite Divine Star. Qi conveyed the information he had collected. His eyes showing reverence and caution, he said solemnly, they are behemoths even among the divine race. They are truly among the pinnacle of the divine race. That's strong. Jiang Ji's eyes widened a bit. To him, divine sons were already an enemy class, and God's sons even more so. By the way, Su Qi interjected, what about the angel divine race? To tell the truth, he had not yet seen anyone from the angel divine race, whether divine sons or so-called God's sons. And whether intentionally or not, he had not discovered any news of the angel divine race appearing in this world. Qi was taken aback, smiled wryly, and shook his head. Brother Su, you really don't know anything. The angel divine race. He spoke enviously. They no longer need to compete for the future, because they are already in the future. Su Qi's eyebrows raised, but Qi did not continue, because at that very moment, a divine son had moved. Both Chenxing and Anan stood up. News has come. Chenxing stood up with the jade pendant in her hand. Those two God's sons, at a more distant advanced holy artifact location ahead. It's one thing for them to seize a high-level holy artifact, but the most important thing is their intent to immediately step into the core land. Their real targets are the three holy artifacts. Now, it's time to make a move. Above the lake, those divine sons had already taken action. They had gathered enough information, and through their divinity, they saw the astonishing resentment emanating from the lake. Although they did not know exactly what would happen near the wooden cottage, they were prepared for anything, ready to vie for power. The lake spanned a vast area. Within the mist, only faint ripples arose on the water, seemingly quite peaceful. But no one dared to underestimate this quietness. Everyone stepped on the surface of the water, with their spiritual energy allowing them to walk on water. As for why they didn't fly, leaving the surface of the water would provoke attacks from beneath. The disturbance caused by everyone's simultaneous onslaught naturally alarmed the dense resentment here. Everyone's nostrils twitched slightly, the terrifying resentment sending a shiver through them. Ghostly apparitions began to appear over the lake. Much like in that famous painting, they let out piercing screams above the water. What bull ******* demons and monsters? A powerful figure looked on coldly. Get lost! In the next instant, they unleashed an astonishing strength, easily stirring up waves, destroying those ghostly shapes. The spread of energy took no consideration. It even by mistake killed some adventurers. Continuous screams of agony, blood and flesh splattered, falling into the lake below. Such an outburst of anger. Chenxing observed the scene calmly. Everyone, be careful. He calmly said, when the fight starts, no holds are barred. There were only 5 Divine Sun teams present, along with other top forces participating, and a large number of adventurers following, all heading towards the small cabin in the middle of the lake. But at the same time, the lake began to surge with waves, and countless ghostly figures materialized, standing over the lake. However, they didn't attack. They just screamed. The crowd ignored them, striking to annihilate all these ghostly apparitions. Their only target was the small cabin. Su Qi watched this scene, his spiritual eyes flickering slightly. Although countless ghostly figures emerged, they posed no real combat strength. Only their ear-piercing screams made people annoyed and disturbed, and even ordinary adventurers could easily kill these apparitions, turning them into splatters of blood, falling into the lake. The water of the lake seemed to darken a bit more with red. However, the most important thing was, Su Qi saw, with each ghostly figure killed, a bit of invisible dark red color seeped into the person who killed it. And everyone else was none the wiser. Even the top forces hadn't realized something was wrong. The Divine Sons were different. Their divinity had traits that drew them to benefits and repelled harm, giving them a premonition, each of them frowning and not making a move. There's a problem. And Nan suddenly furrowed his brow. Stop killing them. This resentment, it seems to transfer to yourself when you kill a ghostly figure. The more you kill, the heavier the resentment becomes. And it easily influences your mind. Many who possessed divinity or special items began to sense that something was amiss. But by this point, it was already too late. Ghostly figures densely covered the lake. A single strike could crush a large swath, and with more figures regenerating in a cycle, their screams made people even more uneasy, angry. The killings were relentless, until, splat, someone was suddenly pierced through by their own companion, their eyes bloodshot, filled with endless resentment. Kill! 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 At that moment, it was as if a fuse had been lit. A group of people's eyes turned blood red, and they began to quiver with the sound of battle, turning on each other in a fight. What on earth is happening? Some still rational shouted. Attack even companions! Whoosh! Su Qi casually turned his head, dodging a cold gleam that came within 10 centimeters of his forehead. The attacker was none other than Lu Fan. Jiang Ji was also somewhat dazed, grinding his teeth, holding back the agitated Rab. What the hell is going on? And then, a calm yet indifferent voice slowly sounded. It's because of the power of the curse. Although those who had lost their reason were still fighting at this moment, there were still many who were clear-headed. They all looked toward the person speaking. The speaker at this moment was the very Divine Sun, who had stepped near the little cabin but had hesitated and retreated. His expression was dark, and he opened his mouth with indifference. This place is all filled with grievances formed by a curse. The more you kill, the stronger the curse's influence on your sanity becomes. They now see everyone as shadows of ghosts precisely because they have fallen into this curse. The other Divine Sons looked at him. Qinsheng seemed to recognize this person and spoke coldly. Isn't it a bit too late to say this now and, at this time, do you think we cannot see that this is a curse? The Divine Sun sneered. Why should I remind the likes of you? He looked at those adventurers who were fighting. They are just lives that deserve to die. He also noticed Lu Fan and Rab who were being restrained, and with narrowed eyes, he chuckled lightly. Your people seem rather in a sorry state. And Nan said solemnly, They are my people. Tell me, how to resolve the curse? The Divine Sun squinted at this new face and chuckled. Perhaps you should first ask me what I actually saw before. Qinsheng, the Divine Sons, and the adventurers also turned their gaze toward him. I saw the source of the curse. The Divine Sun softly said, a pattern that induces unease. He stretched out his hand. The next moment, a pattern slowly came into view of everyone's eyes. Upon seeing this pattern, ordinary adventurers only felt their scalps tingle but did not understand what it was, whereas the Divine Sons and top forces felt their pupils suddenly contract. This is Chenxing showed an extreme shock and fear. The totem of that terrifying being from the abyss. Who? Jiang Ji was taken aback. Curse, death, endless unease and grievances. And Nan spoke gravely, his eyes also filled with apprehension. One of the terrifying beings from the abyss. The god of anxiety. These 4 words seemed to carry endless grievances, and the piercing screams of the ghostly shadows that kept appearing on the lake's surface seemed to come at them like a tsunami. Many divine sons fell silent. Just a totem after all. Why such expressions from everyone? A young master from a top force said softly, puzzled by the emotions of the divine sons, and chuckled lightly. Looks like you're scared? That divine son glanced coldly at the speaker. Although not from the divine race, the person was from a vast force supported by various gods. After all, not all gods gave birth to the divine race. Most gods were upstarts that had risen step by step. The divine son spoke coldly. It is natural for you later generations to not understand, but which one of us is not from an ancient era who has slept until now? We understand the terror of the abyss better than you. Up to now, 3 types of strength have emerged from the abyss: pollution, chaos, and curse. But I must say, the god of anxiety, who controls the curse, is the most frightening of them all. It has the deepest love for killing beings. While the other gods are also terrifying, none hold a candle to this one in their hands. The most important thing is that once its curse contaminates you, you will suffer all sorts of unimaginable horrors. Everyone's faces reflected deep fear and solemnity. Is that so? Yet Su Qi gently recounted to himself. It seemed to be true. In the anxious land he had experienced, everything was filled with blood and grievances, and moreover, there had been numerous ghost faces that made everyone endure the most extreme and cruel tortures. The final city was also full of unsettling acts of self-destruction. Boiling, flaying, and being eaten alive by ants. The god of anxiety indeed took cruelty to the extreme. This also led to the most terrifying curse strength and the most fearsome reputation. But shouldn't people lie in coffins? Su Qi mumbled to himself. And I had Mosquito Bro keep it company. Now its totem, or rather its curse strength, had appeared in a place where it shouldn't appear. Su Qi looked toward the little cabin. This time, the abyss seemed to really be up to something big. Their plans were never just to serve the evil god but rather the revitalization of the strengths of the entire abyss. Moreover, the various expressions of the surrounding divine sons were quite interesting. It seemed the appearance of the totem of the god of anxiety had unexpectedly disrupted their original plans. Suddenly, Su Qi's eyes paused, because he felt a disturbance from the curse on his right arm. It was the blood rage curse left by the god of anxiety using all its strength before being sent into the coffin by him. And at this very moment, Su Qi looked at the cursed tattoo on his right arm, which was also emitting grievance, a grievance that seemed to come from hell, with the most venomous, hateful, and terrifyingly anxious emotions. It enveloped Su Qi's whole body. Buzz! At this moment, Su Qi's eyes turned blood red, a terrifying unease that seemed to devour him like an evil specter. He looked at this scene, his eyes flashing. Damn it! It had started to act up? Truth be told, since the blood rage curse was triggered by certain conditions and stemmed from the grudge of various enemies, but because he was a friendly, kind person, it had always been growing slowly, and because it usually remained stable without disturbances, Su Qi had never paid much attention to the negative impact of the blood rage curse. After all, it was mostly used to suppress the strength in the eyes of the evil god. This time, it seems to be because of that totem just now, which triggered the anomaly? Or is it? Su Qi narrowed his eyes as he looked at the blood red. The power of unease seemed as if it was going to engulf him, yet the people around him couldn't see this scene at all. The god of anxiety also wants to fight for my body. This curse is a fallback left by the god of anxiety. Once the blood fury value reaches the limit, the projection of the god of anxiety will descend. On the surface, it's a curse, but in essence, It's the same as the evil god's strength going berserk. The appearance of the god of anxiety's totem here might be a coincidence, or perhaps a catalyst. However, Su Chi said softly, God of anxiety, have you ever considered that your big brother also wants to do the same thing as you? The next moment, Su Chi looked straight ahead. His spiritual eyes suddenly activated, bursting with power. In the blink of an eye, the blood-red illusion in front of him shattered violently. Those disturbing ghost faces twisted in screams and then collapsed into nothingness. When he had come into contact with the god of anxiety, he had never revealed that he possessed the evil god's eye. The big brother's strength, on the other hand, had suppressed the second brother. And Su Chi slowly opened his eyes. Although the curse's outbreak had dissipated just now, the burning sensation on his arm from the curse squirmed like a bone-burrowing maggot, suggesting that what had just happened was only the beginning. It looks like there really is a part for the god of anxiety this time. Though the blood fury value was not full yet, according to the usual rate, it would take at least half a year. But that was assuming his identity remained unrevealed. Once exposed, the blood fury value would probably skyrocket like a bull market, turning completely red in no time. Xiao O, why are you trembling? Su Chi looked at the doll that couldn't stop shaking. Is it so bad that I'm timid? I can use the power of imagination and sense a lot of resentment. Not just Xiao O, including Su Chi and many other divine sons with divine power, even those young masters with various special items, and even Zhang Ji. They could all sense or see. This lake is filled with boundless resentment at this moment, the doll said tremblingly. And for some reason, I feel extremely uneasy now. My whole body is cold. It's as if some soaring resentment had just appeared around me. Is that so? Maybe your thread has come loose and let in a draft, so you feel chilly, Su Chi responded. At this moment, Zhang Ji's teeth were also chattering slightly. He suddenly spoke up, Brother Su, do you feel it? He glanced over, Zhang Ji's face slightly pale and his body trembling. Just now, I felt as though I shrank suddenly, as if plunging into an ice pit. Maybe you have a palace cold. Oh. Don't be superstitious. Scaring yourself is not a good way to deal with a curse, Su Chi said gently. He knew that the soaring resentment had been created by the curse on his arm. Although it was all aimed at Su Chi, there was still a trickle that seeped out, making everyone present feel an extremely horrible resentment and unease that struck deep into their souls. After all, unlike other gods, the god of chaos and the blood demon god both primarily focused on physical transformation, while the god of anxiety and the evil god brother master came from the same lineage, focusing mainly on mental influence. Therefore, in this regard, the methods of influence of the two were actually quite similar. And you guys! Su Chi extended his hand and smacked Lu Fan and Rab squarely on the head. Stop freaking out. The two instantly snapped back to reality, the red in their eyes fading quickly, looking at their weapons in horror. They were either about to stab others or themselves. Remember not to forget to say that phrase, Su Chi spoke indifferently. At this moment, everyone had, by their own means, forcibly awakened those affected by the influence and refrained from attacking the black shadows. Although not making a move may prevent one from being entangled by the resentment. But, Qinsheng said gravely, the number of ghost shadows here is constantly increasing, and although it's unclear what will happen, we must act quickly. This place was also a twisted space that couldn't be exited once entered, and now the only way out was to obtain the high-level holy artifact as quickly as possible. The group, disregarding the ghost shadows and the tumultuous lake surface, had already approached the cabin, and it was only when they got close that they finally saw the vision previously seen by that divine sun. Centered around the cabin, beneath the surface of the lake was a vast corpse mountain that stretched beyond sight, with the cabin at its peak. And there was also a blood-red ritual connected to a huge totem phantom. That was the god of anxiety's totem seen before. Su Chi also saw this scene, and his eyebrows twitched slightly. The blood-red ritual that filled the land of extreme evil, absorbing a massive amount of flesh and blood, was it indeed for the resurrection of several abyss gods' strength? Boom! And this time, the resentment was clearly even worse, and everyone's eyes changed because a multitude of ghost faces had appeared on the surface of the lake. In that instant, even the many divine sons' faces grew slightly stern. "Be careful," Anan said in a deep voice. "The divinity seems to sense that these are not the same as the previous black shadows." "Come!" A divine son burst forth with strength, snorting coldly and dashing directly toward the little cabin a kilometer away. And the next moment, the divine son's body shuddered, and a sharp pain suddenly shot through his stomach. He looked down. His stomach had actually swollen at that moment. Something was tearing inside him. Cold sweat seeped from the divine son's face. What illusion! Get lost! He unleashed his divinity. However, this time it did not dispel the falsehoods as before. The pain was still so intense that he broke out in a cold sweat. His body bent over directly. Suddenly, a ghost-faced doll burst open his stomach and drilled out from within. "Ah!" The divine son let out a low roar-like scream. "Your Highness!" Instantly someone turned into a blur of motion. In an instant carried the divine son back. And after leaving the little cabin, the divine son, pale-faced, looked down at his own stomach and saw his intestines that had been torn out. The slashed open belly all seemed to be an illusion. It hadn't happened at all. What in the world is going on? The divinity is useless. It's as if it truly happened. Even I really could have died there. The previously sneering divine son looked at the little cabin and the multitude of ghost faces, not sparing any mocking comments. They had also seen what happened, and all of it could happen to themselves. This is the power of the god of anxiety. That's the combination of illusion and reality. All the pain is real. Once, if you break down, all the tortures that occur on the body will also become real. Although Xiao resembled a doll and had no complexion to speak of, its eyes were already wide, somewhat frightened. It muttered, "The abyss! How can it do this?" It clenched its fists, trembling, filled with despair. It knew that it had to face the pollution, the chaos, the blood demon's strength of the abyss. But now the power of anxiety had surfaced, which made its goal of fulfilling its mission even more desperate. The heavy weight of it all made the doll somewhat out of spirit. And Su Qi watched this scene with his eyes narrowed, but with a smile. As he had guessed before, Xiao carried a huge fate and was fighting against the truly top tier of the abyss. Otherwise, it wouldn't feel so burdened and desperate upon seeing the new power of the god of anxiety. Su Qi said softly, "Xiao, you seem to be quite troubled. Why not talk to your brother Su about it? Maybe I can help you solve it." The doll looked dispirited and lost, its voice even more hoarse. You don't even know what I'm facing, yet you want to help me?" It said in a low voice. "You better worry about yourself. It's uncertain whether you can even survive here." Although Xiao hadn't said much, it was somewhat of a breakthrough, having uttered something about its own situation. Su Qi watched as the people were already attempting. Yet he didn't hurry but said softly, "Your enemy is the abyss, isn't it? Your enemy is the abyss, right?" Su Qi's seemingly light tone made the doll shudder violently. The doll's eyes widened as it stared at Su Qi. "You!" It began to panic, ready to deny it. "Don't rush to glare at me," Su Qi said with a smile. "To put it in a way that saves face for you, you're easier to read than my neighbor Old Jiang." The doll was taken aback. "Who is he? A genius with a high IQ?" "No, he's 7 years old and likes to play detective games with me." "What kind of Old Jiang is that? And how is this saving face for me? This is outright insulting. It means I'm not even as good as a child." Yet it felt powerless to retort, because it truly was not good at disguising itself. Seeing various powers of the abyss like pollution, chaotic, and the anxiety curse before it, it would clench its fists hard, filled with anger, hatred, but also powerlessness and despair. Su Qi thought, there was no one easier to read than this fella. He didn't even need to look for a question mark. "Let's talk about serious matters," Su Qi said lightly. Let's have an open and honest discussion. Talk my ass. The doll clenched its teeth, wanting to activate the power of imagination to escape, but then it remembered. Its fantasy stone was in Su Chi's hands. Its eyes filled with even more despair and helplessness. It finally sighed resignedly, hoarsely asking, "What on earth do you want?" Su Chi, observing its every move, couldn't help but laugh. "Why do you make it seem like I'm the bad guy? I'm not going to do anything to you. There aren't many good people like me around." The doll inquired, "Then can you give me back the fantasy stone?" "No." The doll looked at the ghost face here. "I want to perish together with you." Su Chi chuckled softly. "Before you think about perishing together, why not try talking to me about this matter?" The doll's eyes hardened, but after 2 seconds it silently shook its head. "I can't." After being refused, Su Chi wasn't annoyed because this time the doll had taken 2 seconds before shaking its head. Su Chi didn't continue, instead saying softly, "It seems you're carrying some kind of a secret that cannot be told. After all, the enemy is the abyss. But as it stands, you seem unable to do anything." Su Chi's words were sharp. "Your strength isn't particularly great, and you're without companions, a lonely figure amidst danger, unable to cause even a ripple." The doll remained silent but clenched its fists, voice straining. "Shut up! Except that fantasy stone seems to have a very special power. But now it's still in someone else's hands, subject to their whims." "Shut up. Moreover, most importantly, you have started to feel afraid. You are in fear of the power of the abyss." Su Chi's voice became calm. "No matter what you want to do when you are afraid, then you can do nothing. You have fallen into self-despair." It clenched its fists, growling, "Shut up!" The doll was truly growling out loud, even without using spiritual energy to cover it up. The surrounding people did hear it, but they paid no attention because at this very moment various ghostly screams and skeletal ghosts were erupting in rage, leaving them with no time to notice a faint growling sound. After all, those who had stepped near the cabin were now groaning in agony, trying to rely on willpower and their spirits, ignoring the torture and rushing towards the cabin. However, Jiang Ji was somewhat confused as he turned his head around. "I haven't said anything. Why are you yelling so loudly?" On Su Chi's face was only a faint smile as he looked at Xiao O, gently saying, "I'm just stating a fact, and besides, no matter which part of the abyss your enemy belongs to, the strength of an individual is ultimately too small." Additionally, Su Chi began slowly, his gaze holding a bit of depth. "My enemy is also the abyss. It's less about helping you and more about cooperation. Why not give it a try?" "Give it a try," Xiao muttered, slightly taken aback, its expression confused and powerless because what Su Chi had just mentioned were indeed facts. Its current situation was one of despair, hopeless in both its own condition and the enemies it faced, seeing no glimmer of hope. Yet, it didn't dare to easily trust others, now seeming to be stuck between a rock and a hard place. Su Chi did not rush, his gaze calmly watching as everyone approached the cabin, including Nan, who were all beginning to compete fiercely. Finally, after more than 20 breaths of silence, a hoarse voice from the doll reached Su Chi's ears. "You have no idea the enormity of what I'm facing, and you are but a few people." It was naturally referring to having seen Jiang Ji, along with Lu Fan and Rab. Even the only divine son, and Nan, wasn't enough to consider. But Su Chi didn't mind. Instead, a hint of a smile formed at the corner of his mouth. He wasn't afraid of how big the enemy was. The fear was that you wouldn't speak. Once you open up, that's sufficient. "I just want to tell you something," Su Chi continued candidly. "No matter who your enemy is, it's not such a big deal. I've said before, those existences in the abyss, they are all within my top 1 or 2. But this time, he didn't finish his sentence. The doll spoke with a heavy tone. "That's not the same thing at all. You're joking. And It lifted its head, hoarsely declaring, "Am serious. Unfortunately, so am I." Su Qi took a step forward and then stepped into the range of the lake's ghost face. This instant, the doll's eyes bulged, because it was different from the others. Whenever others stepped onto it, all the ghost faces would unleash various torments, with skin tearing and flesh bursting being the lightest of wounds. Each person was nearly gutted, their bones pulled out, with their internal organs churning continuously, the unsettling imagery bringing real pain to life. The deeper the fear, the deeper one fell into it, as if dwelling in an endless hell. Su Qi was unlike the rest. In the doll's eyes, the ghost face that had just inflicted all sorts of brutal tortures on everyone now trembled, submissive as if in victory. Where Su Qi passed, countless ghost faces evaded her path. Daozi? Luo Shenfu exclaimed with a mix of surprise and doubt. Are you serious? To be honest, starting from Su Qi's conversation with Xiao'o, Luo Shenfu sensed that something was off. Had Daozi been serious? But Su Qi didn't respond. Instead, she looked at these ghostly faces and squinted, chuckling softly. She knew them all too well. The same tricks as in the anxious land, and she was no longer the unprepared person she had once been. Having reached this point after so many experiences, whether it was her trump cards or her planning for the current situation, Su Qi was prepared. I'm done pretending. I'm laying my cards on the table. Now was the time to reveal various underlying strengths. Of course, the present reveal was just for the doll and Luo Shenfu. But as time went on, she would continually expose more until she ascended to the grandest stage of all. The doll trembled at the sight. What in the world is going on? Why did this power from the god of anxiety seem to give way to Su Buxian, even with a sense of submission? It should be feared. It looked at the others. No matter who, even the divine sun, ghostly faces dismissed their divinity with ease, their curses and tortures unavoidable as they clenched their teeth and struggled forward, step by step. Only Su Qi was an exception. Could it be this guy was... Are you a being from the abyss? A follower of the god of anxiety? The doll's raspy voice carried a disbelieving, teeth-gritting shock. Otherwise, it makes no sense. Why would this cursed power from the god of anxiety's totem, in your presence, become like this? Su Qi remained silent with a smile. Daozi, don't just smile, talk to me. And Luo Shenfu was even more shocked. For an instant, she felt as if the sky were falling. Their own Daozi was a person of the abyss? To prevent the immortal path steel from falling into the hands of the enemies seeking to destroy the immortal path dimension, it had guarded for countless years, only to end up giving it to the enemy? But it was just a fleeting thought. No, that's not right. Regaining her senses, Luo Shenfu naturally dismissed the thought that had just popped up, as it was impossible. Otherwise, the immortal path steel wouldn't have chosen Su Buxian. Answer me? Who are you really? The doll trembled, ready for the worst. If Su Buxian truly was from the abyss, it would immediately destroy both the Fantasy Stone and themselves. Even if the Fantasy Stone were to shatter temporarily, sending their mission into a fall again, it knew that should it fall into the hands of the abyss, the dimension behind them would face a more desperate calamity. My identity? Su Qi merely laughed lightly. I've said it many times and it's quite lengthy, broad-ranging, covering many areas, but due to spatial limitations this time, I'll keep it short. I represent the fourth power here, the real force capable of contending with the abyss giants, the Hustlers sect. Su Qi fashioned a name tag on her chest with a pin and pointed at the text. Sect Hierarch, Su Buxian. The doll. Madness. Is this a company or a force even making a name tag with a pin? And the doll wanted to ask what in the world was the Hustlers sect really? And didn't this explanation basically amount to nothing? Apart from extensively praising oneself shamelessly, there was only one valuable piece of information. That was the claim of being a force that could truly contend with the abyss giants. The skepticism in the doll's eyes didn't hold back as it said gravely, I wonder how I could believe that. Su Qi chuckled. How about we make a bet? Hearing the word, bet, anyone familiar with Su Buxian's character would feel their scalp tingle at this moment. knowing that a large net was coming their way. Regrettably, the doll was unaware of this and responded with a grave tone. Bet on what? And what is the cost? It's simple. Su Chi snapped his fingers and looked towards the people who were now approaching the lakeside cabin nonstop. The numerous divine sons present may or may not be considered people of a great force. Right now, they are desperately vying for high-level holy artifacts. You know, high-level holy artifacts are the key, and the ones scattered far and wide just lead to an even deeper threshold. This is also, perhaps, the ultimate clue to the various key worlds and various keys that have appeared over time. It was previously mentioned that the 3 holy artifacts are the key to the future, and high-level holy artifacts are the same, only that they lead through the very depths. In other words, right now, the 100 or 200 high-level holy artifacts scattered in various places are actually just the keys to the ultimate passage. Of course, high-level holy artifacts naturally possess extraordinary powers, but to obtain one meant opening the gate. Now, the situation is more like the high-level holy artifacts suppressing the cursed totems, but in reality, it feels more like everything here is trapping the high-level holy artifacts, desiring to utterly destroy them. Su Chi looked at the cabin, its flickering light shrouded by a thick miasma of resentment, making it difficult for anyone to approach. At this moment, the fact that a large number of high-level holy artifacts were being contested by countless individuals was a favorable situation, since the abyssal force under the ceremony was continuously reviving and would at some point directly destroy the high-level holy artifacts. I know, the doll said hoarsely. This place is actually the ritual node of the entire abyss, hence the appearance of various core abyssal forces, and it shifted its gaze toward the lake's depths. This ceremony is already unstoppable. So, the resentment here is frantically restraining that high-level holy artifact, as the abyss doesn't want the power within to fall into human hands. And if the 100 or 200 high-level holy artifacts are truly destroyed, it would mean everything collapses. Su Chi said with a light laugh. So, I want to bet with you. Not only will I obtain the holy artifact, but the doll's eyebrows rose. I will also directly destroy this ceremony's node. The doll's eyes widened, and it roared, Impossible! Putting aside the terrifying resentment here, even the ceremony below, is not something you can meddle with. It's protected by the totem of the god of anxiety, and that totem is a taboo. These divine sons circle around for a reason. Do you think that's why the divine son backed off just now? They only dare to try to take away the high-level holy artifacts, not daring to make any contact with the ceremony below or that totem. Su Chi smiled, seemingly unfazed by Xiao O's impassioned speech. Look, Xiao O knows everything but has been holding back without saying a word. So the bet. Su Chi's unchanging smile continued as he gently said, If I lose, I'll return the heart of fantasy to you. And if you lose, Su Chi smiled wickedly, then you must sign the hustler's sex life servitude. Oh no, employee contract. The doll's eyes widened. You mentioned servitude just now, didn't you? The doll's expression flickered uncertainly, hesitating, as it gritted its teeth. I'll bet. How could it not bet? The key point was, this was also its best chance to take back the heart of fantasy, provided Su Chi was trustworthy. And moreover, although Su Chi seemed to have used a special technique just now to avoid Ghostface, Ghostface is Ghostface, totem is totem. That's the power of the god of anxiety's power, the core of faith, the node of the ceremony. What made it believe Su Chi could destroy all this? That is the fearsome god of anxiety. All right. Su Chi's smile never ceased, smiling in a way that made the doll's heart feel uneasy. At this very moment, many people had already approached the vicinity of the small cabin. These folks could not be called weak-willed. Each one had been slit up and brutally mutilated, yet they had managed to get here, despite the pain causing them to sweat profusely. However, their eyes did not show fear, only madness and steely resolve. The divine sons were an exception. Their mental fortitude was naturally stronger than the rest. What's more, there were quite a few with ordinary strength, but they gritted their teeth, their eyes bloodshot, dragging densely packed ghost faces biting into their flesh. They took steps closer to the divine sons. Lu Fan and Rab, though in the front line, hadn't approached the cabin. Their fear had already rendered them dragged on the ground, screaming in pain amid the blood and boiling oil. This time, even shouting at the demons and ghosts to back off was useless. Among those in the front lines, there was even the figure of Jiangji, his body impaled with chainsaws that continued to grind their teeth inch by inch, the creaking sound accompanying the spray of blood and bone chips. Yet his eyes were blood-red, limping with difficulty towards the cabin, each step spraying a cartoonish amount of blood, risking being dragged into the lake by hundreds of ghost faces any moment. Yet he did not stop. He wanted to become stronger, to rise, the heart of the strong within him never flickering. You could at least move. The doll watched Su Qi, having placed its bets. It had started to care at this moment. It muttered, "Seeing the hellish scene before you, could it be you're regretting?" Su Qi, "Hell," he murmured to himself, then with a smile said, "Well then, it seems I live in hell every day." He moved forward. The god of anxiety, intending to act, he already had a rough understanding. If so, he naturally wouldn't let it have its way. He not only planned to use this advantage but also to return it doubly. He was determined to destroy this totem. And in the next moment, though the curse on his body made the surrounding ghost faces avoid him, Su Qi looked up. The aura of an ancient god covered him directly. This time, a significant number of ghost faces sensed something wrong and viciously pounced towards Su Qi, even more ferocious than with others, carrying a terror of grievances and hissing at his ear. The same happened to Su Qi, and equally brought various bloody, brutal tortures upon him. But Su Qi merely looked on indifferently. Some say, "Heavy lies the crown, and the evil god's eyes are such a crown, though a bloody one." From the moment it began to reveal bursting strength, every second Su Qi's spirit faced the torture from the deepest recesses of his mind, far more intense than anything before him, 100 times, 1,000 times the intensity. "Sprinkle some water now." Su Ke continued walking forward, completely unaffected by the ghost faces around him. He didn't even use his spiritual eyes, although it was the final burst. This also allowed Su Qi to unleash a more powerful strength, taking a risk that comes with benefits. And within a few steps, he had already reached Lu Fan and Rab, grabbing them. "Although both of you have thoughts of changing your fate, you don't have the courage to face it directly. But getting here is about enough. The path ahead isn't suitable for you, but I'll give each of you a Starfire VIP card from the Hustler's Chamber of Commerce, which might come in handy." Whether it was just an illusion or they heard him in their daze, Su Qi threw them out. It was the truth. Their potential had reached its limit. Neither their strength nor their disposition could step further, and the stage ahead was one they could no longer partake in. However, these two would likely still achieve something, considering the distance they'd traveled now and each one's level, because this wasn't flat ground, but a lake. Maintaining precise control over one's body over a lake amid extreme pain, or else one would splash into the lake and become part of the mountains of corpses below. And then, Su Qi walked even further ahead. At this moment the number of ghost faces on his body had reached hundreds, densely packed, yet his expression and heartbeat remained unchanged, each step as if he was walking down a shopping street. "You finally arrived." Jiang Ji at this moment, clenching his teeth, his face twisted in agony, despite being riddled with holes, still staggeringly moved forward. This was not just for the high-level holy artifact. Once the node opened, only those in the cabin could pass through that door. He was equally fighting for himself. "You even have the strength to speak to me, it seems. You still have some energy left," Su Qi said with a smile. "Don't talk nonsense." Jiang Ji, his face reddening and veins bulging, painfully squeezed out a few words through his teeth. "You said the hustlers have a great future, right? Then, prove it to me. Whether that stage is really one you can stand on." Su Qi, gently laughing, responded, "You sure have a lot of demands, but Can you manage it yourself? Or do you need me to? I can. Zhang Ji forcefully spat out these two words, but immediately his thick neck veins were sliced open by a ghost face with a knife. While this was the illusionary influence of the curse, it was realistically bloody and dreadful, and hovered constantly on the brink of death. Surviving all of this would just be a frightening illusion, not leaving a single trace. But if it crumbled, then here would be hell, and each instance of torture received would truly occur to the body, and will also end up like this corpse mountain below, degraded into a ghost shadow generating resentment. Such determination. I'll award you a red flower later. Su Qi gave a thumbs up. Zhang Ji. This guy must be the new ghost face, giving me a spiritual impact right on the spot. He also noticed that Su Qi stepped straight forward, unlike his own disheveled state, but he wasn't surprised. Even though he always had his complaints, he had always recognized Su Buxian. If one is to become the great hierarch of the Hustler sect, then the sect hierarch, how could he possibly be weaker than others? This guy, just don't let me down. Zhang Ji lowered his head, given that his kneecap was shattered at this very moment, yet he hoarsely spoke. And I will not let you down. A surge of momentum exploded within his heart, radiating from him. That lad called Zhang Ji, he's just manifested the spiritual force of a strong man. Luo Shenfu suddenly remarked. Isn't that something only those of Sequence 6 can have? Su Qi murmured to himself. It means that his strength is also close to breaking through Sequence 6. Luo Shenfu spoke softly. Experience itself is the best cultivation for advancing on the sequence path. Every step he is breaking through right now is him overcoming his own limits. Many people here, after this experience, probably have the opportunity to break through to Sequence 6. Su Qi paused. Luo Shenfu possessed the ability to see one's innate potential. He became interested and asked, what about me? Any activity in my spiritual force? Or any signs of breaking through Sequence 6? Luo Shenfu was silent for a moment. From what we see now, Daozi, you may be different from others. If I had to say, there's probably a term that fits. He hesitated a bit. Late bloomer? Question mark. Luo Shenfu had been diplomatic enough. He also found it odd, because he truly couldn't sense any signs of spiritual force emerging from Su Qi. This shouldn't be the case, after all. Su Buxian is the only one recognized by the immortal path steel among so many trialists eliminated over countless ages. That's a sure sign template of a strong man, with an astonishing spiritual force. But in reality, he couldn't find any tendency of spiritual force emerging from Su Qi as it did with others. Moreover, he could see the innate potential of others, which is akin to knowing where they are on their sequence path, whether they have encountered the threshold to the next sequence. However, he has observed Su Qi many times, but can't see through, truly can't see through. He never managed to predict successfully regarding his own Daozi. Why Ghostface avoided Su Buxian was also baffling, including matters concerning the Hustlers sect, and various other aspects. All right, a late bloomer then, Su Qi responded indifferently. He naturally knew the reason because his sequence was too extensive, and the energy required for ascension was extremely astonishing. However, Sequence 6. Su Qi thought it wasn't far off. If everyone here was to ascend, there was no reason he would be the exception. And if he did break through Sequence 6, not only would his strength undergo a qualitative change, but what's more important is the dramatic change that would happen to all sorts of trump cards. The Immortal Path Steel would be unlocked, the Blood Demon Potion could be taken, the Titan Helmet, divine artifacts, and even this mark on the palm of his hand might transform. At this very moment, Su Qi once again took a step forward, now only 20 steps from the cabin. Here, Ghostface had already become an immense burden, appearing like balloons behind everyone, clutching at each person's throat. Everyone who wanted to take a step forward had to exert greater effort, and the torture they suffered not only did not diminish but dug even deeper into their hearts. And here Anan was also present. His face was pale, and his body was already drenched in blood. Likely, all the Divine Sons were in a similar state. No one had the leisure to mock anyone. They were all equally miserable and in disarray. However, they did, after all, possess the blood of a god, and their will, honed over ancient ages, was far superior to others. In such a present world, without any semblance of joyful education, the elite were simply elite, and geniuses were truly geniuses. The potential conferred by one's bloodline was, from birth, a natural divide. Brother Su. Anan panted, using his remaining eye to look at Su Qi. You've finally arrived. He glanced at Su Qi, whose flesh was also continuously tearing and healing, enduring the relentless cycle of torture. But Su Qi smiled like an elder from the Eastern Earth Great Tang who had come to beg for alms. How does it feel? Su Qi asked softly. Can you surpass them? Of course. Anan replied hoarsely, no problem. These divine sons were indeed leading the pack, the closest ones to the small cabin. Each person was adorned with hundreds of ghost faces, inflicting torments that could not erode their will. The hundreds of ghost faces, instead, became like tug-of-war kites, binding onto each person like chains. Every one of them was now gasping for air on the spot. Moving a single finger required all of their strength, let alone maintaining the spiritual energy over the lake to take the next step towards the cabin. And now, everyone was within 10 steps of the cabin. At this moment, it was not that they could not advance, but rather the terrifying resentment surging skyward from inside the cabin seemed to suggest that opening that door would unleash unpredictable events. How come? Having come this far, it feels like you've all lost your nerve? No courage to open that door? Someone sneered. A divine son had his chest torn open, his heart pounding like a drum within. Yet his brow did not twitch the slightest despite being gnawed at. A sense of power naturally emerged. He looked up calmly. You and I both possess divinity, and upon reaching this place, have you not felt it frantically signaling imminent danger ahead? Every one of them had divinity within them, and divinity sought benefits and avoided harm. When they arrived at the front of the cabin, the initially dormant divinity suddenly began to ring alarm bells wildly, warning them of deadly dangers that involved life and death. This was the first time the fluctuation of divinity had been so great. In other words, there was a likely death upon opening the door, but at the same time, their divinity stirred intensely, as if whoever managed to open the door first and enter would be able to claim the high-level holy artifact. It seems there's a new face. A divine son looked towards Su Buxian, squinting as he spoke coldly. And who might you be? He did not perceive the aura of divinity from this young man before him, and he seemed different from the other young masters. I am, Su Qi said with a light smile, the one who will claim the high-level holy artifact before all of you. Hey! The eyes of the divine sons were indifferent or sneering, but none mocked. They simply looked at Su Qi and said calmly, then why don't you give it a try? They didn't even try to stop him, merely watching coldly from the sidelines. Don't rush. You all can just wait here while I... Su Qi said with a slight smile. I'm just informing you because starting now, it's time to speed things up. All the preparations and groundwork he had done until now were nearly complete, and at this moment, there was no need to wait any longer. Instead, it was the abyss that needed time. Moreover, Su Qi needed to break through to Sequence 6, and he had a faint feeling that the opportunity lay even farther ahead. Brother Su, don't go, Anan rasped. Our divinity is madly warning us. They all want to fight for that high-level holy artifact. Qinqing calmly reminded at this moment. But none of them wants to be the first to make a mistake. It's an opportunity, but also a fatal danger. Lacking assurance, they were all the more cautious with their lives. Yet Su Qi walked forward with a light chuckle, taking the mere 10 steps without the slightest sign of delay. Everyone's gaze sharpened, watching in shock as a large number of ghost faces frenetically swarmed toward Su Qi. Behind Su Qi, a mountain of ghost faces had already formed. Resentment surged to the heavens. These terrifying, numerous ghost faces wanted to suppress and imprison Su Qi in place. Like tug-of-war, they sought to hold Su Qi back. But Su Qi kept stepping forward. Each step, behind him, countless ghost faces were growing and expanding incessantly. This signified suppression, wanting to push Su Qi's spiritual power, spiritual energy, and so on, to their lowest limits. This scene also made countless people look up, because a vast shadow of Ghostface Mountain was forming, covering the sky and the land. Brother Su and Nan watched this scene with a somewhat worried expression. Extraordinary will and the terrifying control over spiritual energy were key to reaching the small cabin, and it was no surprise to him that Su Qi could do it. Anyone among the Divine Sons present could manage. Yet not likely with the same casual stroll as Brother Su. But this was not the main point. The main point was the fatal dangers inside the small cabin. His divinity was frantically signaling him. In the past, when navigating through the old days crowd, his divinity would also warn him, but never this intensely. He didn't know what was going to happen, but now he could only trust in Brother Su. However, unlike him, the other people, Divine Sons, all looked on with icy gazes. They didn't harbor any enmity towards this person. In fact, they were quite looking forward to having such a tool person to test errors for them. Everyone was silently watching, wanting to know what exactly the fatal danger was. After all, beneath this lake, there lay totems guarded by the terrifying presence from the abyss, the god of anxiety, and a massive ritual. Qinsheng rasped. It seems he's not an ordinary Taoist guardian, right? I've noticed before, he seems more like a companion. To a Divine Son, normally an ample amount of resources are devoted to their own person, not just Taoist guardians ensuring safety but also such companions. These individuals are often very young, geniuses in their own right, and even possess immense strength and the same sequence path as the Divine Son. Nevertheless, such strength often comes at the cost of various resources, draining potential to create such power at a young age, but equally unable to advance further, since these companions are stepping stones left for Divine Sons, trial stones on the sequence. And Nan paused for a moment, then lightly said, "Was it obvious after all?" After all, a lot had happened along the way, mainly that his own sect hierarch was unpredictably dealing cards, which he couldn't keep up with, and his disguise wasn't as good as imagined. So why didn't you stop him? Qinsheng looked towards Su Qi's silhouette. You're aware of how intense the reaction of divinity is. If you just give the command, as a Divine Son, I can sense your extraordinary qualities, be it in aura or background. No, Nan didn't answer the question but simply shook his head. Mr. Chun, you've got one thing wrong. He said softly, I am the one who follows commands. Qinsheng's pupils suddenly constricted slightly. This statement shocked him somewhat. He, sharing the same status and vaguely sensing Nan's extraordinariness, was actually taking orders from that Su Buxian person? Before he could react. The next moment, crack! Su Qi's foot had already landed on the cabin steps, and the heavy footsteps made everyone's gaze tightly focus on him. Of course, this was because the terrifying rancor around him turned into actual pressure, like a mountain resting on Su Qi's shoulders. Wherever he passed, there were waves of ripples and surging tides. Now, everyone's focus was on Su Qi, and even people stopped their actions. After all, they all wanted to see what would happen. And Su Qi slowly stepped onto the stair, surrounded by rancor that made countless ghost faces scream. The terrifying rancor assailing Su Qi's body. Various visible expressions of pain, torture, and insecurity overwhelmed Su Qi as if tangible. What kind of rancor is this? Jiang Zi's eyes widened, watching the scene breathlessly from afar. Even just standing at a distance made him feel terrified, since he was already experiencing the horror brought by the ghost faces. The rancor there, I've seen it before. Beside him, Qi's voice was hoarse as he stepped next to Jiang Zi, battered but his eyes fixed ahead with shock and respect. In the ancient times, a trace of rancor was enough to make an ordinary man of the native world fall into depression, growing suspicious of gods and ghosts, eventually killing their family and then themselves. And now, he must bear at least hundreds of thousands of times that rancor. Terrifying will. At this moment, Su Qi looked towards the cabin in front of him. slowly halting his steps, all sorts of terrifying shadows, twisted and unsettling things flooding over him, even making the spectators feel fearful, but to him, it still hadn't reached the limit. How to put it? Every bit of strength from the evil god was relentlessly raising Su Qi's threshold to insanity. As if he were always in the depths of hell, how could he be affected in such ways? And there stood Su Qi, also looking towards the exclamation point on the cabin. Actually, after arriving at the land of extreme evil, he had already encountered a few exclamation marks, but due to his current strength, they were only pale red marks, with the risk and danger essentially non-existent for him. So the rewards were usually trivial tools, spirit coins, and such. But when Su Qi stepped around this lake, the first thing he saw was this exclamation mark. There was a deep red, like that of fresh blood, harboring a dark and terrifying resentment, and it bore a sentence. Accept this unease, destroy the nodes here, and you will receive a related great reward. It has been a long time since I saw such a deep-colored exclamation mark, Su Qi murmured to himself, and there seemed to be a few details that weren't visible before. Su Qi gazed at the dangerous deep red exclamation mark. There were added patterns on it, and although indiscernible, Su Qi always felt they bore a resemblance to ancient paradise. Of course, it was only similar. There were many differences, more complex, obscure, ancient, and mysterious. But Su Qi didn't mind. This could be considered as unique divinity belonging only to Su Qi, not only attracting benefits and avoiding harm but also gaining many extraordinary, bug-like rewards. However, it was somewhat perverted, ignoring all rules, even those of the gods of the abyss. Additionally, Su Qi could also feel that this cheat-like ability would grow as his own strength. No, rather his spiritual power grew, his abilities would also change. And next, Su Qi extended his hand and pressed it against the door of the cabin, this place where he had once stayed. He didn't know what it had become now, but he was ready. Crack! The door to the cabin was not as hard to push as imagined. It simply made a grating wooden sound as if it had not been maintained for years. And, at the same time, everyone also gasped slightly because everything inside the cabin had also come into their view. And everyone shivered. Everything around seemed to have stopped. Whether it was the surging waves or those screaming ghostly shadows, the ferocious ghost faces. At that moment all sounds ceased, as if muted. Every one of them truly showed an expression of reverence, with utmost loyalty bowed their heads. And the pain and the recent tormenting illusions disappeared among the crowd. Theoretically, everyone should have been able to breathe a sigh of relief, recovering from that hell-like experience. But they didn't. Everyone shivered intensely, their bodies rigid to the extreme, faces full of fear. Though there was nothing around, everyone trembled unconsciously. Enveloped by boundless resentment, eyes bloodshot, they stared fixedly at the opened cabin. None dared to make a sound. Even the divine sun's forehead was beaded with sweat. And all because there was a figure sitting inside the cabin, and this figure was just an ordinary-looking little boy, with a frail and somewhat feeble appearance. Seated on a worn recliner, eyes closed, as if asleep. Yet this figure instilled boundless fear in everyone. For even though the person was merely a little boy, appeared weak and was asleep, even though there was no information on him, everyone instantly experienced a shiver from the depths of their souls and instantly understood the identity of the person before them. This is the god of anxiety. This was a kind of undeniable and unquestionable reality. The real horror of a divine being that, upon appearance, imposed a terrifying suppression and an unlookable presence on mortals, as if etched into their souls, impossible to ignore. Everyone dared not make a sound, everything so quiet, as if this terrifying presence were merely napping. They did not dare make any movement to wake him. For a while, under the crowd's shocked and fearful emotions, they also fell into a strange silence. They even dared not communicate telepathically, although the oscillation of spiritual energy was necessary, as they needed it to maintain their bodies standing on the lake's surface, otherwise they would plummet into it. This is just a trace of consciousness. A divine sun lowered his spiritual energy and whispered telepathically in a terrified, hoarse voice. The telepathic message did not disturb the quietude, which relieved everyone, but they still dared not move. Just. Qinsheng's eyes trembled. His body had just stopped shaking. This is the terrifying god of anxiety. Indeed. The hint from divinity made sense. Before, the divine son who had almost stepped into the range of the cabin took a deep but cautious breath. This is absolutely a fatal, ultimate danger. If they dared to enter, they would face the terrifying god of anxiety, even though it appeared now only as a projection formed by a strand of consciousness. But it made everyone tremble uncontrollably, producing endless fear and unease. Jiangji and Annan's pupils shrank violently, and at that moment, they tried to contact Su Qi via Starfire, urging him to quietly retreat. But for some reason, Su Qi did not respond to them. On Su Qi's end, things were exploding into chaos. The shock and anxious voice of Luo Xinfu kept resonating in Su Qi's mind. Daozi, get away! This is genuinely a consciousness of the god of anxiety, though only a strand left on the totem. It is the person himself. Don't wake him up. Luo Xinfu had instantly recognized the other party as soon as he opened the cabin door. Having once been a quasi-saint of the immortal path dimension and a demigod in the present world. Naturally, he had also seen the aura and current form of the god of anxiety. Of course, even without the external clues, he could be certain. But after talking for so long, Su Qi hadn't responded. He said with a trembling voice, Daozi, now is not the time to act tough. Normally, you can do as you please, and I don't stop you because I believe in your ability. But not now. You have no idea how terrifying the god of anxiety is. The torture just now was just the tip of the iceberg of its methods, its horrible curses. Su Qi gently interrupted him, saying, First, you didn't stop me before not because you believed, but because I wouldn't listen. Luo Xinfu's eyes widened, and even at this moment, he was poking at his own sore spot. Even though it was true, but was it important now? Second, the god of anxiety, that's all. Su Qi spread his hands. Is it impressive? Luo Xinfu looked at Su Qi's open hands, and alarm bells rang wildly. Fortunately, the little boy lying and sleeping inside the cabin showed no signs of waking up due to this small movement. He then stammered hoarsely, Stop joking. Daozi, you carry the grand mission of the Immortal Path's recovery. Please be serious. Luo Xinfu was about to perform a beseeching encouragement for Daozi to retreat. Meanwhile, Su Qi lightly said, Speaking of people who carry a grand mission, he looked at the doll in his pocket and gently tapped it open. Xiao, what do you think? At this moment, the doll shivered tremulously, hiding in the pocket. Seeing Su Qi asking and looking at it, it was panicked and terrified to the extreme. Played dead, turning into a breathless toy. But that didn't work. Su Qi gently said, You're shaking so much, stop playing dead. Didn't you say the giants of the abyss are your enemies? Now this one, is it? Xiao shakily nodded, unable to suppress this deep-rooted fear from its soul. It even dared not speak. This is perfect. Su Qi looked at the figure of the little boy. The great enemy is right before us. Isn't this the time for you to seek your revenge? Xiao, I'll let you out. You go first when the time comes. Xiao's eyes widened, fear almost spilling out. Don't mess around. Listen to me. Leave now quickly. But Su Qi shook his head. We made a bet, and I am determined to destroy this place. Xiao, then I'll leave first. Come tell me after you've destroyed it. That won't do. Su Qi lightly laughed. You're the witness. Xiao, Brother Su. Or rather, sect hierarch. I was wrong. I won't bet with you anymore. Let's retreat. It cried inconsolably, although at times it had imagined how to deal with the enemies of the abyss. But those were all fantasies and far in the future. Who would have expected the god of anxiety to appear now, even just a strand of will, but it was still the source of fear and anxiety.